Okay, very well. Okay, dear experts, stakeholders, policymakers, fellow citizens passionate about our environment and the future of our planet. I was asked to say some words of welcome, and it's difficult to stay brief because this great event could not take place without a number of people that I'm honored to represent as member of the scientific committee. I will not thank the Remtech Europe Scientific Committee because now it's the scientific committee that is speaking, not just Marco, Nicola, and Piotr as coordinators. Every one of our 30 members gave their support in organizing, giving their time and knowledge during the preparation of this event. You will hear them at work chairing session, asking probing questions and taking some from the chat and keeping time according to the schedule. We have to thank all the people behind the scenes, Silvia, that is not real behind the scenes, but however, it's in this group, Simona, Clara, Patricia, and Francesco, that have worked so hard in recent months to make this event happen and are ready to address any potential problems. I wish to thank all the 196 Remtech Europe ambassadors for helping organize this event, sharing the content of Remtech Europe before, during, and after the conference. They helped in translating the call for abstracts into 20 languages that resulted in having this edition of speakers from more than 30 countries. I wish to thank all the institutions that collaborated in preparing the program and organizing sessions, starting from the Joint Research Center, European Commission for session 1 on soil policy that will start in a minute, the US Army Corps of Engineers for session number 2 this afternoon on PFAS, AESTM International for session 8 Tuesday afternoon on 3 standards recently released, CERDP STCP, that's the Research Institute, it's a complex acronym, but that's the Research Institute of the US Department of Defense for session 13 on vapor intrusion. AISAS, that's the Brazilian Association of Companies that works in the environmental field for session 20 on state-of-the-art of contaminated sites management in Brazil. ADSWIM, that's the European network for session 23 on wastewater. And last but not least, the European Parliament for recognizing the importance of our science to health and well-being of citizens in Europe and beyond. I wish to thank all the exhibitors and sponsors. I can name everyone because there are too many. However, I must mention Rumble that has sponsored all the other sessions, and Enel that has sponsored the session 17 Sustainathon, one of the greatest challenging sessions I ever organized. 24 hours starting from Tuesday 23 of September at 12 GMT, with the great help of Paul, Natalia, Nicola, and also Piotr. You will see all the sponsors during the session listening to their presentations, or downloading Remtech Europe program, or surfing in Remtech virtual exhibition, or in the real exhibition here in Ferrara. I and all attendants say thank you to the sponsors, because this event is only taking place because you trusted Remtech Europe. With your sponsorship, we were able to organize everything and make it free for everybody. It is clear that Remtech Europe is completely different from conferences charging a fee to attend, which are, however, additional opportunities for us to network and collaborate. Because from any remote developing country in all continents, one could follow the conference for free. All you need is just an internet connection. This is an asset, I think, because to get towards a better world from the environmental point of view depends on transferring knowledge to the new technicians in those countries that will be the next generation project manager, control authorities, lawmakers, regulators, and land developers. Last but not least, another thank you is for the more than 1,200 attendants. Thank you for your trust, and I hope everything will go well. Some last minute practical information. During the conference, you will be able to pose questions through the Zoom chat. Questions will be managed by the chairs at the end of all presentations in the discussion panel. For the presentation and the certificate of attendance, you have to register in the Google form of each session, as we have indicated in the program. The big news of this year is that REMTech signed an agreement with the scientific journal, EAM-CETAC, that will publish a special insert about a selection of papers presented here in REMTech Europe. This special insert is likely to be published in March 2022. The program in a nutshell: we put together 23 sessions, including 6 training courses, as I said, but covering a range of topics: mining sites, oil and hydrocarbons, chlorinated compounds, aeriforms measurements, high resolution site characterization, PFAS, bioremediation, microplastics, sediments, 2 special sessions, Sustainathon, and this session 1 organized by Joint Research Center European Commission that I'm honored to have here for the virtual cutting of the ribbon. So thank you for your attention, and the floor is yours, Piotr, to introduce the session. Thank you. Enjoy your favorite sessions in REMTech Europe.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this great introduction. Really, I think this is an impressive event. So first of all, I would like to welcome all the participants from the European Commission Joint Research Center part. There will be also our colleagues from DG Environment presenting some very important content in the next session. I would also like to mention that there is a soil team from the Joint Research Center who has helped me to put in place the session. Luca, Arwin, Diana, Anne, and Serenella, who will be presenting to you later on this morning. I would also like to thank the organizers of this great event, Sylvia and Marco, and all the scientific committee. I think it was a big piece of work to put in place all these sessions. It's really impressive. As you know, we are starting this event with a policy session where we would like to present to you all the policy developments around remediation technology, soil, and pollution. I think that now these are one of the top themes in the European Commission. So I think it's very useful to introduce them to you, although there are still some pieces of legislation that are in the making. So please bear it in mind. I think we have chosen a bit controversial title to this session, which is From Policy Talking to Industry Actions. Will we manage by 2050? Yes, will we manage? First of all, I think we will be listening to this policy talking, but we wanted to approach the industry to have, of course, your insights, to get to know to you better, and also to maintain different links that we have been creating already for years. So I think that that this session is an excellent opening for the REMTech Europe, where industry is present and also some member state structures, administration is present. So why this idea? First, to present to you the current policy landscape. After the presentations, you will be also able to ask different questions and have answers from my colleagues. After the big policy session, there's also a workshop on clean soil outlook. So I invite you cordially to this one, where you will have some JRC considerations, Joint Research Center considerations to clean soil outlook in the making. Let me introduce the first session Soil Policy Perspective. We'll have a couple of speakers. We'll have Mirko Barbero, who is the team leader of the soil group from DG Environment, focusing on soil aspects in the European legislation. Then Joaquim D'Eugenio, senior advisor at DG Environment, presenting Zero Pollution Action Plan. I think that's one of the most important initiatives and documents in the Commission. Then my colleague Serena Sala, Deputy Head of Unit of the Soil Team in DG Joint Research Center, where we'll be listening to her on role of life cycle assessment and an environmental footprint in support to the Green Deal. Then my colleague Rainer Baritz from the European Environmental Agency, focusing on contaminated sites and brownfields and how environmental agency is contributing to following it up. And then finally, Luca Montanarella, the senior scientist at the DGJRC, presenting you the EU Soil Observatory. So I think the time has come to go on with the session. I don't know if Marco, you have something else to add?
Nothing, and I'm looking forward to this great presentation. And just to remind all the people participating that you may ask questions through the chat. Me and Piotr will screen out the most interesting questions and ask them directly to the speakers. That's the only thing I want to highlight.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we can go to the content. So first, please, Mirko Barbero, if you can share the screen with the presentation, and let's listen to you. Thank you, Mirko.
Thank you, Piotr and Marco. I'm glad to be here to present the soil.
Yeah, the screen is coming. We can hear you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So, soil in the Green Deal and the upcoming soil strategy, just to give an overall picture, and then my colleagues will explore and develop on several points. Since the beginning, from the European Green Deal, I mean, from the words of our president and our commissioner, it was clear that soil, healthy soils would have been a key point, a key solution also for to achieve the objectives of the European Green Deal. And this can be seen as well in a more precise way when we look at one nice summary of the initiatives of the European Green Deal. You see each drop is a key initiative, and you see at least 4 of them where soil is a key point. And we will go through them more into detail to see how soil is key. You see here climate, protecting nature, from farm to fork, so sustainable food systems, and zero pollution initiative. Actually, soil has 3 major axes for working to achieve the Green Deal objectives. Healthy soils have a solution for the biodiversity crisis, healthy soils for the circular economy and towards zero pollution, and healthy soils as a solution to fight and adapt to climate change. let's be practical and see what has been already done and delivered up to now. So the European Green Deal started at the end of 2019, and already in May 2020, we had the biodiversity strategy and the farm to fork strategy adopted together. Biodiversity strategy already sets key objectives for soil to be pursued, and the soil strategy will be an answer to these commitments. Then we had the renovation wave, which is also relevant to soil because it focuses on land already used instead of consuming new land, and chemical strategy for sustainability to prevent soil pollution, for example. Then we had the strategy on adaptation, organic farming action plan. In May this year, the zero pollution action plan for air, water, and soil, where my colleague will explain in detail, and the package for climate change, the so-called LULUCF, land use change, and forestry, together with the forest strategy, showing what can be done to achieve the climate neutrality. And in autumn this year, so by the end of this year, we will have one other puzzle piece, which is the new soil strategy. Then let's go into the detail of what is relevant for soil in some of these deliverables. Concerning the biodiversity strategy, it sets a EU nature restoration plan that will have to restore ecosystems, and soil is an ecosystem, in particular carbon-rich ecosystems that are degraded. Then it sets the target for 25% of agricultural land under organic farming, which is relevant for preventing diffuse soil pollution. Then we have, for example, the statement and objective to achieve significant progress in the remediation of contaminated soil sites. And also very important, there will come a legally binding instrument for nature restoration, still to come by the end of this year, to restore degraded ecosystems, and including soils. Even more specifically on soil, in the biodiversity strategy of last year, it was said that we have to step up efforts to protect soil fertility, reduce soil erosion, increase organic matter, adopt sustainable soil management practices, and then significant progress in identifying contaminated soil sites, restoring degraded soils, defining the conditions for their good ecological status, introducing restoration objectives, and improving the monitoring of soil. You see how many of them are directly relevant or indirectly relevant also for soil pollution and contaminated sites. This was the biodiversity strategy. For the zero pollution, as said, it will be developed in the next presentation from my colleague. Just a few words on the climate package, because also their soil features quite importantly. Actually, soils that are not healthy, that are managed in an unsustainable way, are part of the problem because they emit CO2, while if you manage them sustainably and make them healthy, they will sequester soil and they will contribute not only, but they will absorb and retain water, which helps also to mitigate these extreme weather events that are caused by climate change. So their soil will be a key solution. Also, let me mention that healthy forests and healthy soils are intimately linked. One cannot be without the other, and this has been recognized as well in the soil strategy, which was in the package adopted in July. Focus on what will be in the soil strategy. For the moment, we cannot say all details, work is ongoing, but if we look at what was in the roadmap last year, it was already said that the key objectives of the soil strategy will be to step up efforts to protect soil fertility and reduce soil erosion. You recognize the commitments set in the biodiversity strategy. Increase soil organic matter, restore carbon-rich ecosystems. Concerning soil pollution, you see that directly or indirectly there are objectives also related, like protect and enhance soil biodiversity. Also to reduce the rate of land take. You have typically to reuse land. So you need to redevelop brownfields to achieve the no net land take objective for goal for 2050. And then it was clearly said to that we need to progress in identifying and remediating contaminated sites and address diffuse pollution. This already said, but also, for example, achieve land degradation neutrality is relevant because polluted soils are degraded soils that should be counted in the land degradation. These objectives should be achieved by defining actions that promote the adoption of sustainable soil management practices, restore degraded soils, improve the monitoring of soil quality, and then Luca will present more specifically on the soil observatory, and as well developing knowledge and research, including the soil mission. And obviously, as well, cooperate at international level, for example, under the existing conventions relevant for soil. So here we are with the process. The roadmap has been published. There was an open public consultation where we received an important number and interesting contributions that have been taken into account in the current drafting. We have received the input of the soil expert group, and we have worked in the past with the representatives of member states there. It will be adopted soon, but that will be not the arriving point, but it will be the starting point, because then the implementation will start. That will be the point where the policy talking, which is absolutely necessary. I mean, we need to collegially discuss and decide what to do in a coherent way, consistent with the whole ambition of the European Green Deal. So this document, this communication will be the starting point, because then we will have to implement the actions that are there. And when I say we, I mean everybody. We will need the help, the contribution of member states, of public administration, of the public, and of industry, of business, cooperating all together to achieve what we need and what we want. So, well, we are working and we are looking forward to be able to publish the soil strategy. And that's all from my side for this moment. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mirko, for this presentation, and also giving us an overview over the policy aspects and legal aspects around soil. I think that for this community, it is very important. They are providing administrations at the different levels with different solutions and also ideas for the future. So I think, as I already mentioned, there will be a Clean Soil Outlook workshop after this part, where we are going to connect the monitoring part, so what we know about soil, to the outlook part, where we are looking for new ideas. We are looking for the implementation. So I liked very much what you have said, that the EU soil strategy will be just a starting point. So I think that the most important part will come very soon, and this is the implementation. So that's why I think that's crucial to be together with you all here to hear. Maybe we'll collect some questions on the chat. So after all the presentations, there will be some time to discuss. Maybe we can go to the second presentation. I see that Joachim de Eugenio is already ready. So please, Joachim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Piotr. Thank you, Marco. Also Mirko for his first presentation, because it makes my life easier. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here and to present to you the link between soil and the zero pollution action plan that has been presented earlier and already mentioned by some of you. I will just share my screen. Just bear with me for a moment. So
it's visible.
So
everything is okay.
All good. Okay. So as was highlighted, is that one part of the European Green Deal is an action plan that we presented and that we were pleased to put together with many colleagues, and that was finally adopted in May by the European Commission. That is called the Action Plan Towards a Zero Pollution for Air, Water and Soil, and has a subtitle, Pathway to a Healthy Planet for All. So that is clear that two aspects, that soil policy has become indeed more prominent under this Commission, under the European Green Deal, and that we are looking also for a very integrated and holistic policy making, so that we're looking pollution from all the different angles. Now, why is pollution so high on the agenda? We know that we have a number of planetary crises to deal with. There's a lot of focus on climate policy, on the climate crisis. We know about biodiversity and the threat to biodiversity through the loss of species and habitats. There is also a resource crisis, where the amount of resources that we use as human beings exceeds far the capacity of the planet to recover. But also pollution is part of that crisis, and they are all interlinked. And if you look at the pollution dimension, there are some really interesting figures from the WHO, which have then been further analyzed and published by the European Environment Agency, where you see the different diseases, the different health threats that are linked, that are associated with pollution. And number one is cancers, probably unsurprisingly. A lot of that is linked to air pollution, but also to noise, and to a certain extent also to water and soil pollution. But you have many other diseases, heart diseases, also chronic diseases, mental disease, which was a surprise to me personally, that have been associated with high levels of pollution, which is why our president put a zero pollution ambition at the heart of the European Green Deal, where she said that for the health of our citizens and our children and grandchildren, Europe needs to move towards a zero pollution ambition. And as part of the European Green Deal that Mirko has already presented, We have started putting in place all these various other actions that you've heard of. And the main message here is that zero pollution, or the pollution actions, are not concentrated in one document. We have basically from day one, when the first initiatives were discussed, included specific pollution actions in a number of policy instruments. Whether you look at the circular economy, where there's a lot on microplastics pollution, for example, or you look at the farm to fork, which has some targets on pesticides and fertilizers and antimicrobials. We have the sustainable and smart mobility action plan, and this strategy has also put forward reduction of pollution from the transport sector. So you will find a lot of actions already taken, and the chemical strategy for sustainability, which is one part of our zero pollution work, and the zero pollution action plan are basically there to integrate and to join up all these various types of actions, so that we have a very holistic picture on what type of pollution we have to address, and that we have also a response that is connected and effective. And one thing that we set out, that the Commission set out in the Zero Pollution Action Plan, is a zero pollution vision for 2050, alongside the timetables that we have for climate policy and for other policies, such as biodiversity. And for 2050, we said that air, water, and soil pollution is reduced to levels no longer considered harmful to human health and the natural ecosystems, and that respects the boundaries our planet can cope with, and thereby we create a toxic-free environment. I think what is important in that, let's say, overarching vision, perspective, the sense of direction, is that we're looking between the local pollution that is affecting human health, species, plants, animals, and ecosystems, but that we also have a global perspective, that there are planetary boundaries, that there are limits to what we overall can emit to our environment as pollution, over and above the emissions of greenhouse gases, which of course is part and parcel of this wider policy concept. Breaking this down from 2050 to 2030, we have identified 6 targets. These targets should not be seen as in isolation or new targets, because of course we have already as a compass for our policy making the Sustainable Development Goals. And when it comes to pollution, at least in air, water, and marine policy, we have quite a lot of legislation, less so in soil. I mean, we'll certainly discuss that later. But certainly there is a lot of specific objectives and legally binding targets in that legislation. But I think we felt it is important to highlight specific issues also for concentrating our efforts and making sure that we set priorities in the Green Deal. On one hand, on the link between pollution and health. So you see the targets that are mentioned here in blue on impacts of air pollution or transport noise are more associated with health effects. Then there are 2 targets linked to biodiversity and ecosystems, one from air pollution threatening biodiversity, and the other one, the targets already mentioned in the biodiversity strategy on nutrients, pesticides, and antimicrobials. And the 3rd dimension is very much linked to production and consumption. On one hand, linking to the plastics work and plastic strategy under the Circular Economy Action Plan. And on the other hand, on waste policy and reduction of waste overall, which still causes significant pollution. Another element that we have also incorporated as part of the thinking, borrowing a little bit the idea from the waste policy, for example, where you have the waste pyramid as one of the driving forces and principles of implementing waste management. We want to underline something that normally should be taken for granted, and something that is also set out in the treaties of the European Union, that action that we're taking should be based on the precautionary principle and should be based on preventive action. We should avoid pollution in the first place, preventing it from happening, rather than polluting the environment and then having to remediate and eliminate it. And I mean, the soil policy, I think, is a really important part of that discussion, because we're now faced with a lot of remedial action that still needs to be taken. And we have learned the hard way, or we're still learning the hard way, that this is much more expensive than preventing the pollution in the first place. And I think we're not so much saying that this is something new. I think has been discussed and been around for quite some time. But what we're saying is it really has to now translate into all our policy making, all our policy thinking. We have to really, in practice, apply this principle, this hierarchy of action on pollution across the board. The action plan, if you had a chance to read it, is basically divided in two big parts. One, there are the three thematic priorities that I've already highlighted with the targets, so health and well-being, living within our planetary boundaries, so the link to biodiversity and ecosystems. And the third part is linked to production and consumption. But equally important, and I think picking up the element that we wanted to have a really truly integrated cross-cutting policy making, are the enablers, where we look at how we can better implement and enforce what we have. How can we boost the change through societal action, through engaging society? That was also already mentioned by Mirko, working with industry, working also with civil society. I think there's a lot of potential there. Tracking progress and promoting worldwide change. I think these are really important cross-cutting themes that probably ring true also for other policies, but that we want to promote also through the Zero Pollution Action Plan. If you dive deeper a little bit in these various themes, in these headlines that I've just mentioned, you see that in the action plan there's a number of actions under each headline. A lot of them are revisions of existing legislation or initiating some legislative or non-legislative action in areas that have so far received less attention at European level, and I'll come to that in my next slides. On one hand, the action plan introduces 9 flagships. There, the idea is really to bring together policy makers from different fields and really have a joined up, connected policy making. For example, reducing health inequalities, so bringing health policy, social policy, and pollution action together. Also, for example, just to name a few, supporting urban zero pollution action, minimizing the external pollution footprint, or promoting digital solutions for zero pollution. So these are just a few areas that the flagships will address, and they're really designed to not necessarily start a separate process, but really build on existing initiatives and work, and make sure that we are linking it up very closely to our Green Deal and the zero pollution ambition. When it then comes to soil and pollution specifically, the Commission has already decided Mirko was talking about a soil strategy that is coming, and the soil strategy can already build on specific action that the Commission has already decided upon. We have highlighted that soil will play a very important role in the legislative part. So we have a number of pieces of legislation that either are new, which is in particular the EU Nature Restoration Law in the making, or which are being revised or reviewed and revised, evaluated at the moment. And in this review, in this legislative process, also for the Nature Restoration Law, the idea is to integrate soil dimension from the outset and to integrate it very prominently. I think that will be a very important component of our thinking, is not to have a separate piece of legislation, but to make sure soil is part and parcel of all the relevant laws, which is this already to a certain extent if you look at the Industrial Emissions Directive where there are provisions on industrial sites after closing industrial sites that they should be decontaminated, for example. And in addition, there are a number of non-legislative actions. We have already mentioned, Mirko has already mentioned the soil strategy, the integrated nutrient management action plan, but more specifically, and part of the discussion that we're going to have today, is the proposal to the initiative from the Commission to prepare guidance on excavated soils, on a passport on excavated soils, is the watch list for soil contaminants. We are going to produce a zero pollution monitoring and outlook report every 2 years, starting in 2022. And of course, the soil part is a very important one, as well as the integration between soil, water, and air. And last but not least, the research and innovation dimension, particularly driven through the Horizon mission on soil health and food, will be key to address pollution-related issues. We have launched the action plan and started the stakeholder engagement at the European Green Week. I hope you had a chance to participate. If not, you still are able to see a number of many interesting sessions that took place online. You can watch the videos, find out about some topics if you're interested in some topics in more detail. And building on the European Green Week, we're going to launch a zero pollution stakeholder platform. It is announced already by the Commission, and it will get into operation in the next couple of months. We will publicize widely once you will find more information on this, and if you want to get engaged and how you can get engaged. But the idea is really to bring stakeholders and experts from different policy areas together and to create this spirit of moving towards a zero pollution ambition as part of the wider European Green Deal transition that we're engaged in. Not in competition, but together with our climate, biodiversity, resource ambitions. And to bring together actors from different fields and from different parts of life to really work together towards that wider perspective. Obviously, as usual, we would promote good practices. We would look into how we can manage to improve innovation, boosting sustainable production and consumption, and so on and so forth. And there are ideas to work on different topics, including soil in more detail, as you will hear about also in the further sessions or presentations that we're going to have. So with that, all of that, I'm stopping here. If there are immediate questions, obviously happy to take them now, but I think we will have a session of questions and answers later, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. Thanks a lot. I'll hand over back to the chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim, for this excellent presentation. I think it provides a broader picture on zero pollution and zero pollution ambition, which is in the heart of the Green Deal. From your presentation, I liked very much also the focus on the pollution and health problems. So how to link this, because I think it is becoming a very important problem in our society, and also how to link production and consumption, making it also known to the citizens where is the link and how to deal with it. And of course, the link to the planetary boundaries that are there. We have to deal within these constraints. So I think these are like hot subjects that must be discussed at the very high level, at the European level, but also at the specialist industry level here. Also, one thing, the last one that I would like to mention, we are looking here at the European perspective, at the European legal instruments, but we have to have in mind also the going beyond Europe. So I think that this is also discussed, this is also taken into consideration, which is even more important in the perspective of this international conference. Thank you very much, Joachim, for having this insights. I don't know if Marco would like to add something.
Very, very interesting, Joachim. I have a question that I will ask you later during the discussion. I agree absolutely with what Piotr just said, and I see also the links with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's something that is applied everywhere in the world. My question would be on the accession countries, but let's do it later. Okay. So Piotr, floor to you for the next speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. Yes, let's go on. The next speaker is Serenella Sala, the Deputy Head of Unit of the Resource Unit at the JRC. So please, Serenella, if you can take the floor.
Thanks for this invitation. I will share my screen. Okay, let's see if you manage to see it.
It's coming on the screen. I think it's full screen now.
It's perfect, okay. Serenella, you can start.
Okay, thanks. Yes, my presentation will be with a little bit different angle, mainly linked to what has been referred as sustainable production and consumption, because my presentation is focusing on the role of life cycle assessment and environmental footprint in support to the Green Deal, zooming into some of the challenges that has been mentioned for the zero pollution and the circular economy. Just to understand why the angle it's a little bit different, let's think about a car that is driving in a motorway and think about the link with the soil. Many of us will think about, yes, this infrastructure probably is causing some soil sealing. But if we think in a more holistic manner and we want to take a sustainable production and consumption angle, we can also ask ourselves, which is the soil footprint of this car? Of course, there is an entire life cycle behind this car that is starting from the raw material extraction to the manufacturing of the car, to the use of the car that of course also include the fuel production, and then the end of life and a recycling potentially of many components of this car that are basically the waste management related to that. And then we can ask ourselves how and this life cycle is impacting on soil. Of course, this might happen through many different processes. For example, for the raw material extraction, we might have mining with the land use changes and the related soil impacts associated, or the release of toxic metal and the soil ecotoxicity due to this material extraction. From the manufacturing, we might have emission of toxic substances, not only in the soil directly, but also emission into the water or emission into the air that then ultimately may reach the soil via deposition or via the use of the substances in a different manner. And then, of course, we might have as well the soil sealing for the manufacturing plants and all the infrastructure that are related to the logistic of this car. For what concerns the fuel production, and again, we might have issues related to the fuel extraction, a number of toxic substances that are released in soil, the soil productivity losses. For example, if we have a component of our fuel that is a biofuel, actually we might have agricultural related impacts on soil. Then on the use, we might have beyond the soil sealing also the soil litter due to tire abrasion, but also again the issue related to the fact that we are emitting into the air acidifying substances that can then go to the soil via deposition. And then for all the management of the waste, not only for what concerns the landfill that is still a high share of the part of our waste management, but also then the leakages that could be from the landfill, but also the unwanted release of polluting substances during recycling. So these are just examples, but is there any method, any approach that we can put in place to attempt an holistic characterization of the footprint of a product. What is now used for doing that is the life cycle assessment. It's a method that is really designed to evaluate in an integrated manner environmental aspect of a product or a service system through all stages of its life cycle. It's relatively easy, the structure of the assessment. It starts from a goal and scope that could be, let's say, our car with the system boundaries that we want to encompass, an inventory of all the emissions that are occurring not only in soil, but also in the other environmental compartment that, by the way, are anyway related to the soil, so where the fate of the substances may reach the soil. Then there is a characterization of the impacts, so a translation of the emissions on the potential impacts. Today, in the environmental footprint method, which is the, let's say, European way to apply life cycle assessment, there are 16 different impact categories, but those impact categories can ultimately be integrated more into human health impact, biodiversity-related impact, and impact related to the availability of the resources. The life cycle assessment process is ending with an interpretation phase, so it's really meant to be an iterative process to refine the assessment. Now it's really central in the Green Deal policies and beyond, because you may find in several key policies reference to this approach. For example, in the Farm to Fork, that already from the title is addressing the idea of following a supply chain, a value chain. In the circular economy, where several interventions that are foreseen in the action plan are crucially related to the need of applying life cycle assessment, in the zero pollution and in the chemical strategy, in the biodiversity strategy, it is mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goals and in many other policies, including the industrial strategy. So the need of having an ambition for the products that are produced in Europe, but also imported into Europe, to be qualified in terms of their environmental profile. And to make this assessment operational, there are several implementing tools. One of that is the so-called environmental footprint, where the ambition is to compare product A and product B based on the environmental profile. There is the consumption footprint, which is a platform that the JRC has developed together with DG Environment to make a macro-scale assessment of EU consumption and production at country scale. But there is also the consumer footprint, a tool to assess individuals, so each citizen, to understand the impacts of individual consumption. And of course, this is one of the tools that we can think to boost change across society in terms of awareness of the link of our production and consumption with the impacts, including those on soil. It's important, though, to understand what is the ambition and the potential application and scope of approaches like life cycle assessment. Let's think about a pyramid of complexity in measuring impacts on the environment, for example, on soil. Of course, the most complex is measuring, so having a very detailed assessment of the actual at local or global scale impact on soil, with high granularity, with high level of details. Then we might have another, let's say, level in this hierarchy, which is when we want to compare two systems. In this case, we might need to have information that might have a different level of granularity, but that already help us to understand that the system A is better or worse than the system B in a certain type of application. And then there is the top of the pyramid, which is the screening level. So the identification of potential issues, of potential hotspots. So basically the life cycle applicability is on the top of the pyramid because it has not the ambition of saying that in that specific place, in that specific time, you have that impact, which is an actual impact, but to help identify where issues may occur and to help comparing different systems. I'm telling this because, of course, we are covering with life cycle assessment a number of different environmental dimensions, and this is done with the idea of identifying hotspot and to allow comparison. First of all, there is the climate change impact category, where among all the other impacts that are associated with climate change, there are, in the LCA, you are taking into account the CO2 emission due to land use change. The acidification that I mentioned before, so a number of emissions into air that via deposition of acidifying pollutants are affecting plants' growth and ultimately are affecting soil quality. The ecotoxicity, we have actually the ecotoxicity of fresh water as one of our impact category, but the model that we are using to assess this is fully integrating soil consideration. So what is happening in the soil compartment when a substance is emitted into any compartment, so into air, into the soil directly, or into the water. Then the terrestrial eutrophication, which is associated with an excess load of nutrients, hampering natural ecosystem. And then the land use, where we are considering mainly 4 indicators related to biotic production, erosion resistance, groundwater replenishment, and mechanical filtration. So a number of soil processes that can be impaired by certain use of the land, being those agricultural use or other type of use. And there we have other indicators potentially addressed for climate regulation and physicochemical filtration. So the exercise we were doing was to have a platform in which these indicators are calculated for Europe, linking that to production and consumption. Our platform, it's called Consumption Footprint Platform. It has 2 components. One, which is very territorial based, and it's called domestic footprint, that is including also soil footprint, where we have collected for a time frame of over 15 years environmental emissions monitored or modeled at country scale, translating these emissions into the potential impact indicators that I mentioned before, and comparing this indicator against planetary boundaries and assessing the trends over time. These colors that you see there are basically the share of the emissions that are contributing to the impacts that we see over time. And those emissions are mainly monitored or modeled emissions into the different compartments, including soil. And then we have the second component of the platform, which is the most consumption-oriented. That means that we are not addressing only what is happening in a country, but also this embodied pollution that Joaquin mentioned before, the external pollution footprint, because our consumption in different areas like food, mobility, housing, household goods, appliances, has also a component that is beyond Europe. So in a consumption perspective, this component is taken into account. And again, all the emissions occurring in the life cycle of the products that are consumed is translated in impact indicator, and again, it's compared with planetary boundaries and it's assessed over time. And in this case, we are handling mainly modeled emission along the entire life cycle of a product. Coming back to the example of the cars, this means to model which emission may occur along each life cycle stage of that product. The products that are considered are representative products that are basically referring to food, as I mentioned, to the housing, to the household goods, to the appliances, and to the mobility. And of course, we can zoom into the results looking through the lens of specific compartments. So we are doing that for water, air, and soil, but of course for soil, we can zoom into that. And the platform, it's basically, it's now available online, and people may look at that in terms of the country that is interested in, or in a specific impact categories, looking at the time frame for the evaluation, and also understanding, for example, if the impact in absolute term for the country, or per capita, or per square meter. And then it is possible to analyze which are the main environmental pressure that are resulting in a certain impact. Then I conclude with this individual impacts evaluation, because we developed a consumer footprint tool. That means that there is a sort of questionnaire that people may fill in, covering the 5 areas of consumption, to see individually what is their impact on the 16 environmental impact categories, to which extent their individual consumption pattern is overcoming planetary boundaries, and also, sorry, there is something with it, and also comparing his own individual patterns with an average EU citizen. Just to conclude, of course, it's very challenging to combine the territorial perspective with a supply chain perspective, but if we want to enhance preventing measure, it's important that the entire life cycle of product and system is taken into account, and also this external footprint is taken into account, modeled via the products or the finished product or the semi-finished products that we are importing in Europe. Several environmental footprint impact categories are related to soil. Of course, this is not the end, it's the beginning, in the sense that for sure there are a number of elements that could be improved in terms of modeling of the soil impacts, and this is something we have to do, joining forces with different domain experts, including those in my unit that are, I mean, the soil expert in the JRC. As I said, we were having this platform to really present results that are considering these representative products, so a product-based assessment in different areas of consumption. And as I said, we can extract a soil footprint as a basis for further evaluation, but also for policy interventions. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Serenella, for this excellent presentation. Also giving another perspective, so life cycle assessment perspective, and I think it may help to foster individual behaviors. With the life cycle assessment, everybody will have a better vision on how different products are impacting our compartments, air, soil, and water. And of course, from that, it appears that there is a vision, a more important vision of integration. We have different products having impacts on different parts of our life, and we have to look at them in an integrated manner. It comes also from other presentations where now the Commission is proposing some tools and also legislation and pieces of legislation looking at this in a broader integrated perspective. So thank you very much for this. Marco, maybe you would
very interesting talk, Serenella, and I was on the perspective on how life cycle assessment can be used to shape future policies, because we, as you have mentioned, we have not just to see the car running, but also the impacts to build the car. So reasoning about the global perspective. I have also a question for you, but let's do it later in the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you. And we can go on with our presentations. The next one, Rainer Baritz, Geospatial Information Services Specialist and soil expert from the European Environmental Agency. So Rainer, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning all together. I hope you can see my presentation and you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, and we see the presentation full screen.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah, thank you for inviting to present during this workshop the EEA contributions to the topics that we learned about this morning. I assume that most of you will do know EEA quite well and how we operate. You may then know that we are a fairly small agency of roughly 240 now colleagues, covering a broad array of environmental topics. And you could say that we are the front end at European level of country level environmental engagement. Most of all environmental protection agencies that cooperate with us send their experts into working groups with us and exchange their knowledge so that we can synthesize at European level. Regarding soil and our activities related to contamination, one cannot say that it is just EEA operating. It is the network that I just mentioned, the National Reference Center Soils in the IONET and the European Information Observation Network. However, we are also closely collaborating, of course, with JRC, also with the Common Forum on Contaminated Land, and we are supported by one of the European topic centers on urban land and soil systems. So it's more a structure of working groups and partners that work together within EEA. We do have over time developed an indicator system that is backing up the various European environmental action plans. We conduct regular assessments like the status and outlook of the European environment reporting every other 5 years. And especially more recently, we have created cross-agency work on chemicals, which brings together experts, in my case, soil, but then also from air pollution and also in particular water pollution. So we are cooperating and discussing how we can respond to the various challenges. On the EEA indicators, you can see that we do have various indicators in place regarding air quality, industry, water, and regarding soil. It's the famous contaminated progress in the management of contaminated sites indicator. These are indicators that respond to policies. Many policies regarding the Green Deal were mentioned this morning already. And there are existing policies which are somewhat in revision, somewhat valid in the reporting that we are conducting. In discussions, certainly you can imagine is the link between indicators into a system, into a consistent system where we can inform about the state and impact of pollution across various compartments, environmental compartments, and also recipients that may be at risk from pollution. So this is our interest. And we are doing this, as mentioned, in the status and outlook of the European Environment Reporting, the last one published in 2020. What you can see here is an extract of the key results for the indicators and topics that relate to pollution. So we have some indicators and sections on air pollution, on chemical pollution, industrial pollution, freshwater pollution, and land and soil. And when you just take the key results from the reporting from the past trends, it is evident that a large proportion of topics that we are covering in this report shows mixed pictures that are difficult to interpret on the basis of the information that is provided to us or that we can collect. It looks a bit worse on the outlook side. The outlooks are also usually rather weak modeling based, and the information sources are even less reliable than on the past trends. You can see for soil that the situation overall, we concluded that deteriorate developments dominate currently and also in the upcoming future. So what is our role in support of current policies? You can imagine that with the indicator system, we are interested to bring this indicator that we have in our framework, but also in combination with other frameworks to bring that forward and that make them better adapt and fulfill the requirements of policies. So what you can see on this slide is an overview of the ongoing technical developments and discussions regarding indicators. As you can concluded from the previous discussion of Joachim and Mirko from DG Environment. There is currently a system of headline indicators in discussion on a very umbrella basis within the 8th Environmental Action Program, and a public consultation has been launched. What is not, let's say, public is the discussion to which extent remediation can be part of a EU restoration law, especially related to urban ecosystems. A proposal is made, and it's a question whether that can be maintained in that context. We do hope so, because any incentive that comes from a binding policy is a very important framework to follow up. The chemical strategy for sustainability was mentioned. There, a framework of indicators is also in preparation. The chemical strategy has been published. The framework on indicators is not in public consultation yet. It's in the beginning of being drafted, so that it can then enter also consultations with all of you. The Zero Pollution Action Plan has, in a staff working document, which is public, laid out a system of indicators in a monitoring and outlook framework. And as was mentioned, a biannual reporting under the Zero Pollution Action Plan. Joachim mentioned that in 2022, the first Zero Pollution Monitoring and Outlook report will be published by the Commission with several elements. Two of several elements are the monitoring reporting and the outlook reporting. It's how the terms of content will exactly look like, that is not clear yet. Back to the European Environmental Information Observation Network, I would like to tell you briefly the status. The National Reference Center Soils, it seems that this is the last year that this group will act under this name. The IONET cooperation system is currently being revised strategically with our members to make it even more participatory and co-creative, also to distinguish a bit more the policy support and the data streams that are involved with the IONET. Very likely, SOIL will be continue to operate under a so-called IONET group. So the national reference centers will be replaced by so-called IONET groups. And the one on land system will contain also the information that we collect and exchange on soils. The working group soil contamination, which is a very key activity in the NRC with regards to contamination, will definitely remain a key task in the new working group, because the indicator in the land and soil indicator set 003, which is progress in the management of contaminated sites, plays a very important role in the policies that were mentioned this morning. Yeah, the working group soil contamination has a terms of reference and certain objectives of how the experts want to work together. They want to advise all countries represented in this network to better describe and share the data about soil pollution via indicators, especially on contaminated sites. And they have also discussed or are discussing options to extend the knowledge on contaminated sites to supplement the statistics that are collected so far by more information about polluting activities, substances, risk procedures, and also some geographical reference, so that the information can be also spatially further utilized. The working group is fairly established. A view on collecting statistics on 6 site statuses. That has been an ongoing and long discussion over 3 levels of questionnaires that were exchanged among the group partners. The latest questionnaire from 2016 and published in a report by JRC in 2018. Very recently, a global assessment of soil pollution has been conducted by FAO, by the Global Soil Partnership, with the status of soil pollution in Europe. And several countries expressed their wish to have a look at the 2016 statistics again, which is a process that we are intent to launch very, very soon, so that with that information, the last indicator update from 2014 can be re-updated basically by the end of this year, or very likely next year. Just to give you a bit of an insight into the current discussions in the working group, the comparability of thresholds or screening values across Europe plays a large role in the policies discussed, especially zero pollution. It's very important to have a European-wide picture of what the situation is and what needs to be done for both diffuse pollution and also local site-related pollution. And so nomenclature, terminology is very important to be accurate about. The working group members know really well the challenges about it. There are large differences between countries, how they have developed and apply their screening values in different risk assessment methodologies. And the current discussion is very nicely summarized in a report that we are about to finalize, and I'll come back to that in a second. And this is the report, this is the result. This has been developed from the two key authors of a chapter on contamination, Paul Romkens from Wageningen University and Frank Swartjes, the chair of the working group Soil Contamination. It provides an overview of what we know about different substances, to which endpoints they refer to, are critical limits known, and are these limits also properly transferred to soils and where this is placed. And it shows you in one overview the large progress that the pollution-related policies in Europe can build on country level. A second last slide on brownfield redevelopment. Here I'd like to highlight a recent 2017 report between JRC and National Reference Center Soil on the achievements on soil remediation and brownfield redevelopment. Regarding the challenges, and what I would like to bring across is not something from EEA or from myself. It's in fact it's taken from a summary report of a conference on brownfield redevelopment by the European Commission DG Environment in 2019. And there you can see very nicely, I just extracted from a large list of open points and challenges, the key ones that would refer also to what is needed to implement any incentive that would come from the Green Deal related pollution related policies, and certainly guidelines and protocols is something that is then needed on the technical level. On a summary, my last slide is the indicator in the land and soil indicator set of EA is a very important repository of information about contaminated sites, which needs update urgently, not only with, let's say, the existing indicator framework, but also improvements towards more content and systematic sharing of national statistics as a monitoring instrument. We are not quite there yet with this indicator, and we hope that that can be done in the follow-up of political incentives very soon. The challenges I've mentioned already, many challenges, so I will not go back to it, but you can read up on this in a report that I just referred to, which we are preparing at, which will be launched this week, in fact, for review. So I hope that most of you will see that report and can also comment on it and guide us to improve it, so that we can then finalize it. Corporations are definitely important. There are many topics that we cannot solve in an operational network. There we need close links, especially to the research sector. And when we look at current developments in soil research at European level, it sounds very promising that by bringing things together, networks, operational networks, research networks, we can probably very likely solve many questions that I raised in my presentation. With that, I would like to thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you have questions and I can answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rainer, for the European Environmental Agency perspective, and also underlying the fact that we are not doing this work ourselves. We are relying on a network of people, of institutions. I think that that's one of the most important elements of this work. Also, a nice focus on the contaminated sites and inventory. It needs update. I think it will be discussed this afternoon. We'll also see some methods. We will be involving different networks from your side, from Common Forum, from Nicole. So there are a lot of actors that are involved. So thank you very much, Rainer, for presenting this. Maybe Marco?
Absolutely interesting, Rainer. And just tell us, I am also in EUNET group, and there is also Frank Svartis online. Just tell us for time when you want to collect the new status of contaminated sites in the member states, because there is a work behind this to put all those numbers together, and especially for countries where the data are managed at the regional or local level. So it's important. However, I think it's important to understand the status, because otherwise also the policies cannot be shaped in a good way. Just this, Rainer.
Well, this is a very good question. Thank you very much for raising it and allowing me to answer to this. I would distinguish two elements of this update. And we have an indicator template in the EEA system to which the previous results from questionnaires were mapped towards. And the last update is from the 2011 questionnaire published in 2014. So now we have the 2016 questionnaire published by JRC in 2018. So it's very easy to update the existing template and just make sure that in the template that also other partners of us use, that information is contained. However, in the context of the activity of the Global Soil Partnership that I just mentioned, several countries flagged that they want to update the figures that are already reported. So this update I'm discussing with Frank Svartis at the moment, so hopefully we can do that even this fall. So it allows all members to update the existing figures. Also, we have some questions regarding some of the statistics supplied to us earlier, so that we can bring it in the context and really ensure that what we conclude about trend is on the basis of the current information. The second aspect is a real update of the indicator. So in the light of the policies that we hear of today, we need to discuss in the working group and probably also with other partners how we shape up this indicator so that A, it's consistent with previous results, and B, it can be extended. And that is a bigger discussion. So it will lead to a new indicator template that then really fulfills the information needs. Improved information shared, but also a higher level of information needs coming from the policies. So two steps, more or less a correction step, that is the first step, to make sure we have the right figures and you don't kill us when we publish then the indicator with the results of the questionnaire 2016. And the second one is a discussion on how we shape up this indicator for the future.
Thank you, Rainer.
Thank you very much for these insights. I think that from this discussion, it appears evident that we are looking for data, then we are looking for information indicators, and it will maybe allow me to introduce the last presentation of this policy related session, where Luca Montanarella, the senior scientist of the DG-JRC, will present the EU Soil Observatory, which could be a kind of response to some of the questions. So Luca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Piotr, and good morning, everybody. Being the last of this series of very interesting presentations, I think a lot has been already said. So I will try to be quick so that we have still some time for some questions and discussions at the end of this session. So quickly, as you said, Piotr, I will briefly introduce the EU Soil Observatory. Let me first try to share some slides with you, and I hope that you can see them
It's coming
properly.
On the screen. Yes, it's full screen now, and we can hear you.
Very good. Thanks a lot. So quickly, as you said, I will present briefly to you the EU Soil Observatory, a new initiative by the European Commission that we actually presented to the general public and to the other Commission services on the occasion of the World Soil Day last year on the 5th of December. The EU Soil Observatory is now in its making in this year, and I will communicate to you a few highlights and few new developments. Let me first embed the observatory in the overall context and highlight the mission of this observatory, or the vision that we have, which is to become the principal provider of the necessary data and knowledge for EU level matters relating to soils. So it's a very much a cross-cutting initiative responding to the various different policy areas, and particularly, of course, to all the different components of the European Green Deal. I will not go in the detail of the various strategies and components of the Green Deal, because they have been already extensively presented by Mirko and Joachim in the previous presentations. Just to highlight that soil is a very cross-cutting issue. So the observatory has the ambition not to serve a single policy area, but to serve a number of different policy areas that are relevant to soils. And this, of course, is quite challenging because data there are of different nature, of different type that need to be collected. And I will come back to that because that is really the challenge and the really ambition that we have in this new initiative. Concerning the overall organization, the observatory is hosted with its secretariat in our unit, the unit Land Resources at the JRC, Unit D3. But we are essentially managed by a steering committee that is made from the various services of the Commission that are relevant to soils. And so the steering committee is actually the governing body of the entire operation. Actually, the steering committee met for the first time last week. And so we have already some guidance on the way forward. We give a lot of attention then to be participatory. So we would like, and I will come back to that, to have as much as possible a transparent and participatory process in the operation of the observatory, and particularly in the collection, and then also access to the various data that we want to collect and distribute to all the interested stakeholders. So the stakeholder forum is a key component of the observatory, and we'll come back to that. Within that forum, we would like to establish then some dedicated working groups, technical working groups that will address key areas and key priorities within the issue of soil monitoring and soil data and soil information. And also to that, I will be briefly coming back towards the end of my presentation. I would like to also recall that, of course, the JRC is a research organization. It's a science policy interface. Actually, it's a service of the Commission, but closely linked to our research program. So obviously, there is a close link between the observatory and Horizon Europe, our new framework for research in the current financial cycle. And of course, within Horizon Europe, as you know, one of the new initiatives of the Commission has been to launch missions. Missions are a little bit something coming from the vision that comes a little bit from US of the mission to the moon or things like that. There were actually 5 mission areas that were identified by the Commission some couple of years ago, with mission boards being established with experts that have been advising the Commission then on the way forward on the various mission areas. And very importantly is that we have a mission area dedicated to soils, which is the mission on soil health and food, that has already a clear work plan and a plan to how to be implemented. And that's where also the observatory, of course, is closely linked and embedded. That's why I will say a few more words about this mission. The mission Soil Health is, of course, aiming towards achieving healthy soils across the EU. And this is, of course, part of a research effort and research innovation effort that is centered essentially around building a participatory approach in living labs and in developing lighthouses. So showing on the ground locally that things can be done differently, that things can be done in an innovative way that will be providing the necessary tools and the necessary sustainable soil management practices that can then be duplicated, replicated in other parts of the EU in order to achieve then the ambitious goal to have healthy soils everywhere across the EU. Of course, there is a big effort in communicating this, but there also must be a big effort in measuring and in monitoring actually implementation of these ambition goals. And that's why the observatory is a key element of the implementation of the mission on soil health, and particularly the collection of relevant data that will measure the effectiveness of the measures in the future in achieving healthy soils across the EU. So the observatory has essentially built around a number of goals. The main goal is, of course, and the first goal is to have an improved EU-wide soil monitoring. We have already quite some sophisticated tool at EU scale for monitoring soil conditions. As you know, we launched already some years ago, actually in 2009, was the first survey, a system called Lucas Soil. It's based on the Land Use Land Cover Area survey that we have established already years ago on a regular grid 2 by 2 kilometers across the EU. As you know, this makes up roughly 1,100,000 points that get then stratified, and we have a sub-selection of roughly 250,000 points. Out of those, we have roughly 25,000, 30,000 locations on which we go and physically take soil samples on a regular way. And being these locations highly documented and georeferenced, this is building on the, then allowing us to have a very robust system and a very comparable system across EU member states. And also allows us to go regularly back to those sites and so have also trends in several parameters related to soils that can change over time. We have already a number of sampling campaigns being completed. The first one, as I said, was in 2009. Then we had one in 2015, 2018, and we are currently implementing a new campaign 2021-22, so that we have a regular monitoring system built around a centralized system managed by us already since some years. The ambition of the observatory is to combine this system with what is existing in member states. I think it's crucial that we have a common understanding of processes occurring in the EU related to soils, and this can only be achieved if we work closely with our member states. So integrating Lucas Soil with the national soil monitoring system in those countries where they exist, in the member states where such systems are operational, is one of the key ambitions of the EU Soil Observatory. Of course, it would allow us to multiply the 25,000 locations with the additional locations available in member states, with a very ambitious goals, maybe to achieve one day 10 times larger sample of around 250,000 locations if we achieve the full integration with national soil monitoring system. And this is currently being discussed with member states in several working groups and in several also dedicated projects within Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe in the future. Now, of course, the result of EU-wide soil monitoring is then having harmonized data across EU of several key parameters. These are an example of typical results and outputs from the Lucas Soil exercise that covers basic soil parameters, but also relevant parameters to this meeting. For example, soil contamination is monitored across EU for heavy metals, for several pesticides, neonicotinoids, insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, and so on. Antibiotics have been included recently. So we have a regular monitoring with an harmonized system using a centralized labs in order to avoid interlaboratory issues of different methods and different differences between laboratories, so that we have a very robust harmonized system across the EU that delivers data on a regular basis. And this is the backbone of the data that will be used by the EU Soil Observatory. Of course, this data needs to be then made available to everybody, and that's the ambition of continuing the operation, which is now existing since nearly 20 years, of the European Soil Data Center, which is the reference for having access to EU-wide soil data already since several years. the data of the Soil Observatory will be made to a large extent freely available to all stakeholders over the European Soil Data Center that will continue to be operated and strengthened in the future. Of course, data needs also to be digested and somehow presented in a way that can be policy relevant and immediately understood by everybody in the sense of indicators that can then deliver the necessary indication on the actual success, or maybe hopefully not, failure of some of the policies you have already been hearing about. Data should at the end feed into an indicator system that allows us to closely monitor the most important soil-related policies at EU level, the soil thematic strategy, but of course the common agricultural policy as well we heard about it, Zero Pollution Action Plan, but many other policy relevant policies need to be closely monitored through a robust indicator system that is based on actual data measured on the ground. So the indicator system is a crucial element, but let me not forget, as I said, that JRC remains embedded in a research environment and is also a research organization. So for us, an important goal of the observatory is to continue high-level research, cutting-edge research on relevant topics that are emerging concerning soil data and soil monitoring. Particularly relevant are the new emerging issues and interest in monitoring, for example, pesticides and antibiotic residues in soils. The big area of monitoring soil biodiversity. As you know, soil biodiversity was very much neglected in the past. By now, we have a huge amount of new data coming in thanks to the new DNA-based approaches, metagenomics, and that we are applying now on many sites of the Lucas Soil Survey. So that allows us to have new insight into soil biodiversity at EU scale. Then there is all issues that are emerging around antibiotic resistant genes, microplastics, many others that emerge continuously, and that's why we need still to maintain a strong research base within the observatory. And of course, a close link to the research initiatives of Horizon Europe. We will closely collaborate, of course, with the quite large amount of new research projects related to soils that have been launched and will be launched in the future. Finally, let me close addressing the final element, and to us probably one of the most important elements of the observatory, which is the European Soil Forum. As I said, we have the ambition to be inclusive and to be transparent as much as possible. And that's why we think it's crucial that we involve as much as possible from the very beginning all interested stakeholders, including, of course, the REMTech community, including the community dealing with contaminated sites and remediation of contaminated sites, including, of course, all the relevant Commission services, the European agencies related to soils, the European Environment Agency, but also the European Food Safety Authority in Parma and the European Chemical Agency in Helsinki. I mean, many different actors and stakeholders that are relevant to what we are currently doing and plan to do on soil monitoring and soil on the Soil Observatory. Of course, there is also linkages then with international organizations. Let's not forget that a lot has been done and is going on globally through FAO's Global Soil Partnership, but also through other international organizations. And of course, member states, farming associations, industry, NGOs, and as well, and we saw there are many of them, interested citizens. So the forum is for us a very crucial initiative, and that's why we are already launching the first event. The first forum will take place actually very soon in October, 19th to 21st of October. We will have the first stakeholder forum. You are more than welcome to join us. Please register at the site that you see here. At that forum, as I said, we have also the ambition to create some dedicated working groups on specific topics. And contaminated sites could be one of them. Why not? And so I really hope that we will have a lively discussion, an open, lively, transparent process that will lead to an effective EU soil monitoring system in the future. And with that, I would like to close and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luca, for this presentation of one of the most important tools of the Commission, which is the European Soil Observatory. I think that two keywords that I would like to take out from your presentation is harmonization. I think it's harmonization on data collection and data analysis, and then presenting the results in a clear and unambiguous way. And the second one is stakeholder forum that will be launched very soon in a month. I think that this, of course, will allow to make links between different stakeholders and networks that we are operating in. Marco, would you like to add something?
Piotr, thank you. Very, very interesting. Also the talk from Luca, and absolutely great event. Also 19 and 21 October for this stakeholders engagement. I would like, Piotr, if you agree to start with the discussion. There is the first question. Apart for the certificates and the presentation, let me clarify that everybody would receive the presentations, will be collected by me and Piotr and shared to all the people that have registered in the Google form. And regarding the questions, there is one from Sabine. She is from EM CETAC, one of the vice presidents. I don't know, Sabine, please correct me if I'm wrong. And the question could be to everybody, all the speakers. Post-Brexit, does the UK still play a role here, or this one more issue they have opted out of? I don't know who would like to take the answer on this relevant and tricky question. No, so for the soil policy, the treaty within UK and European Commission are such that UK is doing it alone, or there are some form of collaborations? And while we are trying to, everybody is going to think how to answer to this. Piotr, if you agree, I will start with another question to Mirko, starting from the first. By the way, all the speakers try to think about this. Mirko, my question for you. I'm more curious of this biodiversity strategy. No, it's legally binding, and there was also a statement from Nicole, no, on this issue. No, I know everybody knows that we have different ecosystems in Europe. How we can manage a common policy on this field, on the biodiversity legally binding threshold when we have different ecosystems, with the ecological risk assessment, or is still to be decided up to the end of 2021? What is the situation?
So you're meaning the nature restoration law that has been proposed, committed to be presented in the biodiversity strategy by the end of this year. So it's coming, it's there, and we are working for that, for ecosystem restorations. This means there is an impact assessment who is looking at the options. There are several options, and then it's the moment to decide, okay, which target are ready to be proposed now, on which base, how to distribute those targets among member states, which maybe targets instead of are not yet ready to present it now, because they need further work on assessing and monitoring and mapping before being able to present something that will be legally binding for member states. So all this is being worked on and discussed. I cannot say what it will be. So just wait a few months more, and it will be more. I mean, it will be public what the Commission has decided, okay, based on all the elements.
Okay, Mirko. So the decision is up, is still to be taken on the technical part on how doing this. Piotr, do you have any question to Mirko, or we may switch to Joachim?
I wanted to maybe underline some things that Mirko presented, talking about the EU soil strategy still in the making to be published very soon. You were mentioning that then the implementation comes. Implementation consider also member states, industry, and citizens. What are the channels that we can use, in your opinion, for communication with those institutions? You were mentioning the open public consultation at some point, so this is the standard commission tool. You were mentioning the EU expert group on soil protection, which is an institutional group helping to make this dialogue. What other tools are important in your opinion, and that you are personally also using to communicate to member states, to industry, and to other actors?
Well, surely, as I said, what we will need in implementation is to cooperate and to use all resources and efforts. So we will need to connect and even more to the existing networks and actors. So, okay, institutionally speaking, the soil expert group is key for sure. But then also there is the EU Soil Observatory that will be for monitoring and not only for knowledge. It will be a key actor. But then all these existing actors, I'm not going to mention them. I mean, there are so many, and we will have to get in contact with them for implementing and getting help coordinating for the implementation of specific actions. So that will be an important work of networking, even more than, let's say, communicating broadly to the general public, which will be done through also the Commission communication channels. We will try also to use social networks, because this also helps. We have already some colleagues which are quite active on Twitter, for example. So we will use all what is possible, but as well personal contacts, which are always important also for networking. And not to forget, obviously, the agencies, colleagues in agencies, and the European Soil Partnership as well, which is an actor in Europe. So all actors will be important, at least for a part, because soil strategy will have a very broad scope. So we cannot involve everybody for everything. We will have to target for soil contamination, and then land take, and then fertility, and so on. I hope it was more or less clear.
Yes, thank you very much for this, Mirko, and thank you also for being here and getting in touch with the community. I think that most of what you have mentioned, people, participants, stakeholders are here, so it's also a good public for this. So I don't have more questions. I go back to Marco.
Yes, Piotr. By the way, I'm happy that some questions have been asked into the chat. Let's do it. Let's end the first round, and maybe we can come back with Mirko if there are additional questions to him. To Joachim, I have one question to Joachim. I've seen that there is a strong link of the EU policy to the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And there is, I would ask if there is a focus also in countries that are asking access to EU or the neighboring countries. For instance, we have online Maha El-Shemi, that is an high representative of Ministry of Environment of Egypt, and there are many people from, for instance, Philippines, India, Iran. We have just one planet, and as the youngest says, there is no planet B. So my question is, Europe is just an example to follow, or Europe may sign some agreements to promote its policies to respect or the respect to the environment?
Yeah, thank you, Marco, and thanks for the questions also. And I think it's great that this event is bringing together so many different interested parties around the world. And I think is one of the messages from the European Green Deal and from the European Commission, that ultimately a lot of our policy initiatives, most of our policy initiatives, are driven by global concerns. I think I tried to illustrate that in the beginning, that we live on one planet, and so I think that the policy initiatives, of course, that we're taking are on one hand looking at the legal order of the EU and looking at the instruments we can do in Europe itself, and making sure that we translate our ambitions in concrete actions at home. But I think the global and international dimension is cross-cutting across all our policies. And I can tell you that for the Zero Pollution Action Plan, there was actually a very high level of interest and also of drive from the political level to make this dimension more prominent. So there has been a close collaboration with our colleagues and partners in the different DGs. And the global dimension has so many different angles that it is impossible to summarize them in a few minutes. Also in the document, there are really only headlines. You've mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, the EU is very committed to them, and as part of that, the European Green Deal and the Zero Pollution Action Plan will make their contribution. I think across the board, we are building and working very closely with the international partners, with international organizations, in particular the UN. We have had very close collaboration with UNED and WHO in the preparation, and we want to engage with them in the implementation of the action plan. You know that at the UN level there is an implementation plan on pollution. There's initiatives on a pollution-free world. So we don't see this as a competition or as a new initiative. We very much see the Zero Pollution Action Plan as a contribution to this global ambition. And we are, for instance, also very keen as EU to get on track a global agreement on plastics pollution. I mean, these are all elements that are already discussed at the global level, where we want, in a multilateral setting, engage with our partners around the world. But then in addition to that, we have a lot of regional actions. We have a lot of bilateral actions. There is, of course, a specific dimension when it comes to neighborhood policy in the close vicinity to our also candidate and accession countries. There is a discussion already ongoing, and we are very keen to establish also dialogues. And we are already, I've just seen an invitation for an event in, I think, East Asian partnership that we are in dialogue with. So we're trying to engage at all levels, and that's not me personally or DG Environment. I think that is something that we have established, what we call as the Team EU in the foreign policy, where our delegations in the different countries, where our colleagues working on different international partnerships are really promoting this agenda. And let me underline, I think the importance of the agenda is not an agenda of a specific topic. It's about bringing together this transformative, transitional character of the Green Deal by saying is we have to achieve our climate goals. We have a biodiversity crisis that we have to address. And as part and parcel of that, pollution plays an important role. And we need to think of integrated solutions, how that all fits together. And that is where the soil dimension is so important to become more prominent in these discussions. So it's maybe a very high level answer, but I think there are really so many different aspects, and I can only encourage everybody who is interested outside the EU to know more and to get in touch, to make use of our EU delegations across the world, and really express interest or use the many partnerships, research fora like REMTech, like research projects that exist with partners around the world to get involved. We are very happy with any type of input, and I think it's a global issue that we have to find global solutions for. Thank you.
Thank you, Joachim. So Europe is really has the door open to the knowledge and to let other countries to understand more on how to protect the environment. Piotr, any question to Joachim?
Yes, I wanted to know a bit more about the flagships. You were mentioning this as integrated initiatives, of course, taking into account air, water, soil in an integrated manner. Do we have some good examples concerning pollution, health, production, consumption, or planetary boundaries? What can we know? How can we find these flagships in the making?
Yes, thank you, Piotr. So I think the idea behind the flagships is really, as I said, is to strengthen the collaboration with many different actors who probably and sometimes have the environmental issues, the pollution issues, as one of the things they are thinking about, but it's maybe very much in the periphery of their thinking and of their work. But because of the clear evidence and clear demonstration, I think that's something again that the European Green Deal I think is revolutionary about, is that ultimately our problems in the world are becoming so complex that it will be impossible to solve them in a linear way, in a siloed way where each discipline struggles for themselves to find a specific problem. And I think that's also great by the fact on how you put this panel together and the discussions that you're raising here in this conference, is that we have to bring all actors together and find a way. It is complex, it's challenging, but find a way that we all can be part of the solution and that we all connect the dots between the different actors towards the same direction. A colleague of mine once told me the best thing would be if we can find a kind of a common idea, a common narrative, a common magnet, if you take this analogy, where we then align all our compasses to. So all our compasses move in the same direction because we all want to achieve the same thing in the long term, which this is why also the long-term objectives and goals are so important. And with that in mind, we are basically having very specific outreach. It's not necessarily that, again, DG Environment is doing that, but for example, on the health dimension, we are working, and that was also an idea from our colleagues working on health policy in DG Sante. We're working together with them and see how can we, for instance, now organize events. We have, for instance, heard from some member states that the health ministries and the environment ministries have rarely met to discuss health and pollution issues in their meetings. They have separate meetings, they have separate agendas, separate work programs. So we are looking to bring these agendas closer together. I don't know whether you are aware of the Beating Cancer Action Plan that the Commission has also published, and that's in this part again. One dimension that is very important is the social dimension. So again, we are reaching out to our colleagues in DG Employment and says, okay, I think we all know, and again, I think that applies also to soil policy, that pollution often affects the most vulnerable in society, and health is the first thing that suffers. Yeah, I mean, if you find accommodation that you can afford, it may be in areas where the pollution levels are higher in terms of noise, in terms of air quality, etc. And so these type of initiatives we want to foster at European level, but we want to also very much to initiate and give inspiration for the national level and all other levels to basically say, let's think or multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. Let's bring people together and let's combine our efforts and our energies to have solutions that we agree to aim for with our policies. So that's a little bit the idea behind it. It's more the flagships is less of a concrete action in terms of a product. It's more really about the engagement and the process of bringing different disciplines together. Thank you, Piotr.
Thank you very much. So I take a lesson of breaking silos. So I think that could be a nice summary for me. I don't have more questions. Maybe
Piotr, there is one in the chat from Wolfgang Friesl. Sorry for my pronunciation. that is for Joachim and also Rainer, but as it's a very policy question, for also Mirko could answer and address this. The question is on sewage sludge. How and when will the conflict of goals will be solved concerning the use of sewage sludge, circular economy action plan versus zero pollution action plan? And the comment is that last regulation is from 1986. So translating the question could be, is the European Commission thinking of revising the sewage sludge directives?
Yeah, I can very briefly say, I mean, we are all here, I think not working directly on the sewage sludge, but the colleagues, what they're doing at the moment is doing an evaluation precisely for that point. I think the context of the directive from 1986, I mean, the proposal of the directive is even earlier, from the early 80s, was completely different. I mean, the policy landscape was different, our challenges were different, and the sewage sludge directive at the time had a very specific purpose. We have moved on massively, and there was a lot of discussions over the last 10, 15 years whether the sewage sludge directive is actually still useful and how it can play its role. The Commission has now decided to do an evaluation to do exactly what Wolfgang is asking for, is to look a little bit how it can be modernized, it can be brought into the new landscape of building a bridge, I would say. I don't think there is a conflict. I think there are certain trade-offs that have to be managed between looking at the circular economy, at resources, at waste, and looking at chemicals, hazardous substances in waste, etc. And this will not go away. So it's not about saying either one or the other. It's about finding clever solutions, how you can basically bring circular economy and zero pollution ambition together for the concept or for the subject of sewage sludge. The evaluation is finished next year, as far as I am informed. And of course, there is on the table a revision then, to do a revision. There is also on the table of a question, do we need it as it is, or are other instruments maybe more effective? Or do we need to amend other legislation? I mean, sometimes, for instance, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive is under revision. So it may well be that some of the solution will be by changing the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and not the Sewage Sludge Directive. So this is exactly what the Commission is looking at the moment, and it's too early to make any conclusions. But if you're interested in that topic, and if you have something to contribute, now is really the good time to feed into the debate, because as I said, our colleagues are in the middle of the evaluation on this legal instrument. Thank you.
Thank you, Joachim. There are no other questions for the moment. Piotr?
Maybe just to intervene also on this sewage sludge question. Actually, just to let you know, we as the JRC are also involved in the revision, of course, from the modeling part. So how different substances, potential contaminants or not, are being transferred through different media. So once again, this integrated approach concerning, of course, runoff, soil, and underground waters are taken into consideration and modeled by the JRC scientists. So just as an info for you.
Thank you, Piotr. We can move to Serenella. I have, let's say, I haven't seen any questions in the chat for Serenella, so just one from me. I was hit by the consumption footprint platform. My question would be: is it free? I mean, may I use it for my students at the university? They are asking me every month more thesis or title thesis, and this could be absolutely an instrument that could be used. So my question would be: is this consumption footprint platform a software? Could be downloaded? Could be used? What is the situation of this platform?
Thanks for this question. No, it's a website that can be browsed freely, and the data behind can be downloaded. it has to be seen as a living organism, not as a final product, in the sense that, as I mentioned, we were putting together information coming from different sources and translated, let's say, in the indicators for the LCA. But it will be open internally in the Commission and also with member states for further refinement. But for educational purposes, you are more than welcome to use it. And also, if you spot something for us that is, for some questions or for some clarification, we will be more than happy. I mean, it's really something we are now launching, and that is meant to strengthen also the type of discussion we are having here on how to integrate the different dimensions, having also the soil quite prominent in the evaluation.
Very well, Serenella. Thank you. I take the opportunity also to say hello to Valentina Greco, that is one of my students now online from the chat. And if there are any other questions, Piotr, any question for?
Yes, maybe a comment, because we have let's say a very scientific approach of dividing different questions to, for soil diffuse pollution, then maybe a point source solution. Life cycle assessment allows us also to understand better what's the impact of a product that, for example, is a car, as in a given example, and providing a very broad picture and unfortunately a very broad impact on environment that this product has. My question goes a bit to the EU Soil Observatory and the links between life cycle assessment and the tool that you are describing. How does that relate? Is that foreseen to provide some inputs for the Soil Observatory? And what would be the data flows, possible data flows, and also how it can be reflected in future dashboards? So if I want to have a vision all over Europe, can I access this information through EU Soil Observatory in future?
Thank you for this question, Piotr. I think we have to go back to the pyramid that I showed, because actually the observatory, it's very much to have concrete and actual information on the state of the soil, gathering data that are coming from different sources, and also, let's say, improving the modeling to be closer to reality. So the issue is that we are using models that are needed for screening or for this comparison. And actually, the idea is that refining those models over time will have to build on the assessment that are done at the bottom of the pyramid. So for me, the issue is I don't think LCA in any manner may arrive to the same granularity that the observatory is aiming at, but of course may build on the data that are and the information that are gathered there to refine the way in which we are comparing two systems. For example, today you might evaluate two agricultural systems based on certain information that are estimated, that are representative for a certain region or for a certain country. While in the EU Observatory, you might have also information at a scale that is much, much higher in terms of granularity. So the issue is really to think how this information can be linked to refine models, to refine the assessment, to be sure that when we say that system A is better than system B, we are even more grounded on what is happening in reality. So I see very complementary the two things, not and the other way around. It's very difficult for the observatory to be able to say, okay, without a modeling approach like LCA, to be able to respond to comparison of product system or comparison of approaches that are including multiple scales, but also multiple processes So on one end, the waste treatment, on the other end, the manufacturing plant, on the other end. So I see a lot of complementarity. I hope we will manage to capitalize on each other knowledge.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Serenella. So I would say data, scales, and comparisons are important here. And of course, we must look for some interactions. Thank you very much.
Piotr, there is a request from Sabine. She's deputy director of SETAC. Now I can introduce her better. And for Serenella, you know, Serenella, I've seen that you have put the link in your presentation that will be available for all the attendants, but you have already done. Okay, in the chat there is the link to the platform. That was my question. Thank you very much, Serenella, and thank you also from Sabine. Now we can switch to Rainer. There is a question from the chat, Rainer. Before from Natalia Nogueira, but before the question from Natalia, I would mention that coming back to the question of UK, I would say that the UK, apart from the European policy, is on EUNET and is fully member of this network that reports on the soil, for instance, in the EA. But then the question from Natalia, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I have a question specifically regarding potentially contaminated sites. There are more than 2 million potentially contaminated sites in Europe, to be honest, are polluting activities, if I remember well the definitions. I believe that there might be even more in developing countries. What has been done to deal with the sites in Europe? I understand that they cannot be addressed at the same time, but how to prioritize? What are the tools to identify which one is the more critical? Is there a strategy or a plan in this sense? Flora, to you, Rainer, it's not easy to answer this question.
No, it's definitely not easy, but it's a great question. And that question has been discussed very intensively during this Brownfield Redevelopment Conference that I mentioned in 2016, regarding access to funding, available funding, what are the problems, and how can brownfield, in particular remediation, be accelerated or improved. And it turned that it's not necessarily the lack of funding, but it's also the lack of guidance to access, and also so to a certain degree, the lack of incentive, in fact. But this is really not easily answered. More easily for me to answer is the question of prioritization and tools. And there are very many experts in this conference here who are the ones that actually implement the prioritization based on risk assessment procedures. So before a site has to be remediated, it needs to be investigated whether risk comes from that site. And this is the prioritization. It's not a political one that we can do a European level one. It's the one that many countries with their national soil protection legislations have put in place in order to identify sites which are posing risk. And these sites are then taken care of. So there are mechanisms. What interests us on the European level is to get as much information as possible about these mechanisms and how countries, in this case local and regional authorities, progress on the planning and implementation of remediation measures. So we want to support these activities and flank it with political, let's say, an umbrella to increase the incentive to operate that way. When we look into the statistics, you mentioned the statistics, they are quite difficult to interpret since the number is largely an estimate. So the countries that have the let's say, the most sophisticated risk assessment procedures in place also have most of the contaminated sites. So the number of sites per se is not an indication for a good or bad status of what we know about contaminated sites management. So when you dig into the figures, there are still very many gaps that we need to fill in order to have a very clear picture, and then also to more targetedly advise our partners so that remediation can really kick off more intensively than it is currently.
Thank you very much, Rainer. Piotr?
I was looking for unmute button. Thank you very much, Rainer, for these insights. In your presentation, you were mentioning that remediation is important, but I'm looking also for the comparison between remediation and prevention. Joachim, in his speech, he was, of course, telling us that the most important is the prevention. So I think that now a lot of European legislation is looking at the prevention side. However, we are facing the historical contamination, historical contaminated sites, orphan sites. What would be your evaluation between this prevention measures and the history that we must face? Is it difficult from first of all inventory point of view, and then addressing this from scientific and policy side?
Whoa, challenging, Piotr. I would say that prevention is a topic that well applies to diffuse pollution. Their preventive measures by land users, by practitioners, is based on the proper guidance, an instrument that could work. In terms of contaminated sites and prevention, it's largely an issue of accident or spill prevention. In my presentation, I mentioned several policies, National Emission Ceilings Directive, Industrial Emissions Directive. So there are a couple of policies, mercury regulation. There are a couple of policies that address current polluting activities, whereas contaminated sites largely, to a major extent, addresses historic site pollution. No? And on the current, when we look into the pollutant register that we have developed for the Industrial Emission Ceilings Directive, there is a category of industrial emissions on land, but it's hard to report it because you could argue how much of the emissions that come from industry are directly emitted to land rather than to water or air. So we do not see our knowledge base on emissions to land is still quite limited. So we are expecting and hoping that with the incentives now coming through the indicator systems, suggesting a closer cooperation with the countries on the reporting on indicators, that we understand more of the processes. In summary, prevention, I would say, is closely linked to more the issue of diffuse pollution than on the issue of site contamination.
Thank you very much. And also, I think that the theme of diffuse pollution is gaining some place as far as soils are concerned. So, for example, with our studies and Lucas monitoring program on soil and Lucas soil pollution module that will be developed, I think we will be getting more and more knowledge with this harmonized data collection, harmonized analysis, and providing the results. Just to mention the pesticides that we are being collecting now, trying to see what's the extent of this diffuse pollution present in our soils. So maybe a diffuse pollution conference will be a good place to discuss it further, to get some additional insights. Thank you very much, Rainer, for the inputs.
Okay, Piotr, we can go to Luca. There are 2 questions from me and 2 from the chat. So Luca, stay ready because there are a very interesting presentation. My first, I will do first my two questions. The first is how this European soil monitoring is linked to the 7 threats of the soil. I mean, referring to the old communication 232 and 231. And the second question is regarding the stakeholder forum on, let's say it again, 19-21 October 2021. If I can invite the members of IMPEL network. IMPEL is a network, European network of practitioners on inspectorates and environmental protection agencies.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the good questions. Well, for the forum, of course, you can. As I said, we want to be open to everybody, so IMPEL is more than welcome. So we should definitely try to be as much as inclusive as possible and open to everybody. For the first question, well, what was it? The 7 threats. Well, I think we are now, we presented the EU soil thematic strategy in 2006. So it's quite some time ago. I think things have evolved quite impressively and quite interestingly. I think we have a huge amount of new scientific evidence on many things. And so I think we need to adapt also our monitoring system to the new knowledge that we have, to the new priorities also that emerge from what we have understood in the past years, and of course for the new policies also that we have. So of course many of the threats remain. I just mentioned, for example, soil erosion is a process that is still ongoing in many parts of Europe, and it's still something that needs to be closely monitored. So the threats more or less are all there. But what I think is different now is first of all, the scientific knowledge about it. We have much more insights and much more understanding on how these threats develop, how the processes are that are underlying those threats. And the other thing is, of course, that policies have been evolving and we need to be responding to the new policy framework, which is mainly, as I said, the European Green Deal and all connected strategies and priorities.
Thank you, Luca. The two questions from the chat. The first one is from Christian Murray. Does the European Soil Observatory work with the small medium enterprises as part of innovation solution building?
Absolutely, yes. But I must say, as I said before, the forum is there to be open to everybody. I must honestly admit that for the moment, we have been mostly contacted by large enterprises. So very big industries and private enterprises dealing with soils, particularly, of course, the big agro industry and agrochemical industry companies, Syngenta, Bayer, Yara, all the well-known ones, are of course closely in connection with us and are interested in what we are doing, because there's a close connection to what they also do in collecting data, CropLife International, for example, and all the others. But I think, as you say, there are many other enterprises related to soils, and particularly, of course, in this conference, all the world of the small and medium enterprises dealing with soil remediation, contaminated site remediation. And I think the effort that we are making in contributing to this conference is also related to that. Actually, that's why we are here, spending a couple of days together with you in order to maintain a close contact with the small and medium enterprises, because it's crucial for us to involve everybody, including the small and medium enterprises, of course.
Thank you, Luca. Very exhaustive answer. Another question for Christian that I see also online. Welcome, Christian, to our webinar. How do we look to establish connectivity with wider data inputs from private stakeholders, for instance, farmers, investors, sources, as to verify against the European Soil Observatory standards, protocols, and add to the database? data sharing in real time? The second question.
We have a huge interest in crowdsourcing of data. I think technologies there have been tremendously evolving. It goes even to the possibility to include, to collect data with your personal private cellular phone, for example, collecting directly. There are now several apps available for your phone where you can collect direct soil observations, but I think you can collect also more sophisticated data. And I think they're working together with landowners and particularly with land users like farmers is crucial. I believe strongly that there is a huge potential in involving the actual land user in collecting relevant data in a consistent way. We must only provide the necessary tools and enable them to do so, but I think there is a huge potential for that. And this is also in relation to contaminated sites. I think citizen engagement on contaminated sites is crucial, and it's been very often one of the driving forces to trigger remediation. So empowering citizens to collect data about contaminated sites is, in my view, the one strong instrument to make things happen. And actually, we have plenty of examples where actually it happened that way. So, so I think that's very important. I forgot the second question is access to data. Was it that? Was it about access? I think.
Just a moment, because I don't not anymore on the same. How we are approaching real-time data sharing? Is there any interest in using some alt-chain technology to meet data privacy?
Yeah. Data sharing is very important for us, and we have been always strongly advocating to give free access to all data we have. But still, we must, of course, remember there are regulations. There are especially regulations that protect privacy of specifically concerning soils of the landowners and the land users. So there are limitations to which extent you can share georeference soil information. There are type of data that are subject to privacy, and so we need to comply with that. But definitely the Soil Observatory has the ambition to make all possible data that we have as much as possible accessible to everybody within current regulations, of course.
Thank you, Luca. Floor to Piotr.
Yes, I wanted maybe to follow up on the data sharing. Indeed, just to confirm what Luca is saying, we are advocating data sharing and we are providing information to public. But I think that this process must be also seen in two ways. If somebody provides data, then this data will be available and more data will be available for the person. So I think that providing and receiving feedback is one of the most important mechanisms. On the other side, we also have new digital technologies. So maybe some years ago, some information was not available because it was remote, and then we were unable to see this. However, now with, for example, Copernicus, we are ready to see it, to understand, and to analyze. So, of course, we are for data sharing, but it must be done within the current legislation, which is the tricky point here to find the good way. My question to Luca would be about dashboards. So we have the EU Soil Observatory. It's a tool, but do we have an interface to the people dealing with policy, stakeholders? How is it happening, or how it's foreseen in future?
Yeah, that's a good question, an interesting question also, because you see, we are a big advocate of measuring. So you measure parameters on soils, for example, texture, pH, I mean, hard numbers. But these hard numbers usually to the non-expert or to the policymakers are not directly giving a clear interpretation of of what the actual end users would like to know. And so we tend to translate then these hard numbers into something that is an indicator system, possibly simplified to the point that it's just a traffic light system. So red, yellow, green, saying when it's red, there's a problem. When it's yellow, there could be a problem. When it's green, things are going okay. And here starts the very tricky part, because the way you define what is green, what is yellow, and what is red is, of course, crucial, and becomes very often a very delicate decision. And so here is the big difficulty in defining a dashboard that should give us a clear indication on progress made, for example, on policy implementation, because defining what is good, what is not so good, and what is really bad is, of course, sometimes highly subjective, and sometimes very much driven by policy priorities more than by evidence. So I think we must be very careful with dashboards, but of course it's important to have one in the observatory, because we need to provide clear indications on the directions we are going. Here I see a very important collaboration also with the European Environment Agency, because of course the agency is by definition the big expert in implementing dashboards and indicators. And so here we must really work together in feeding the data that we have in the European Soil Observatory into the national, in the necessary reporting tools that the agency has and will also further develop, that are essentially then these indicators that give us an indication in which direction we go. So I see in this way, but I think still things to be discussed, especially in the forum and in the various working groups.
Thank you very much, Luca. From my side, there are no more questions. I know if there are some reactions.
Thank you, Piotr. There was one question to Rainer. I've seen that Rainer already answered and gave his availability. Rainer, it's dangerous to put your email in a chat. You know, you may have a number of questions then, but regarding Pram's methodology, I take the opportunity to tell Natalia that this afternoon, and I will just let me share the screen. Tell me, Piotr, if you're able to see it.
Yes, I see.
In the session 3, sustainable management of contaminated sites, there will be a presentation exactly at 15:35 Central European Summer Time, contaminated sites prioritization in the Republic of Serbia, that I'm also one of the authors. And there is a prioritization of the 32 most polluted areas in Serbia. So join us for, if you're interested, Natalia, this afternoon, starting from 14:30, session 3. And I take also the opportunity to show you the first half of our program. We have 33 sessions during the Remtech Week, that is completely 23 sessions at all. As you can see, I take the opportunity also to show the second part of the week. No? So you may pick up the sessions where you are more interested and join us. So that's it. I don't have any further comments. Piotr, we can, if you agree, we can go to the coffee break.
Yes, there is a coffee break, and just to remind you, we have 10 minutes of coffee break, and 11:45 we will start a workshop session on Clean Soil Outlook. So our first considerations on how to build it, what are the elements, and how to deal with monitoring, and then outlook for the future concerning soil pollution. So let's have a coffee break, and let's meet again in 10 minutes here at the workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piotr. And any other remarks from the speakers? I would like to thank you all for this great, interesting session that we had in the first part. Any other remarks from you?
No, just
no.
Okay, just an invitation. There will be some
Conference.
Slido, more interactive Slido contest.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. And have a good break.
Thank you.
Thanks to all.
Thank you. See you in 10 minutes.
Hi, Marco.
Hi.
Just to know if you see the screen with the shared PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, I'm able to see it. Put it into not in the full screen
Yes,
mode,
yes,
of course.
not yet.
Okay, okay. No, we see the presenter. Let's say
The presenter
screen.
mode.
Exactly.
So I just have to discover. I will maybe find out.
You may stop sharing, putting and sharing the let's say the PowerPoint, but in the full screen mode.
Yes, yes, yes. I made this screen too.
Exactly. We can see perfectly. Okay.
Okay. So trying to see also whether this is visible. Just to be sure, Marco, have you
yes,
succeeded?
change screen, Piotr. This is a private.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, there was also some password, and we cannot share it.
Okay. Sorry. Trying to click on the right things. Okay. So I think that we can start. I found back the button for the webcam. So I hope that you see the right presentation screen of the Clean Soil Outlook workshop.
Yes, I can confirm that is perfectly shown in the screen.
Good, good. And I think it will be nice 1 hour and 15-minute discussion over the Clean Soil Outlook. So first of all, what is it, the Clean Soil Outlook, within the larger context as well? And then we'll show also preliminary table of contents. And you will see there will be some discussion on the watch list. This workshop has not been prepared by myself. I had a team of people collaborating with me. They are present here and they will be helping me in the presentation and also in the Slido. We have a Slido to follow up. And this is Anne Maréchal, Diana Simoes Vieira, and Arwin Jones. So this is the part of the JRC soil team present here. As you see, we are going to put this Clean Soil Outlook in a larger perspective, in the zero pollution for soil. And of course, the question remains, will we manage by 2050? What are the objectives of the workshop? Is first of all to openly discuss with you the subject and then call for contributions. And because we are looking for you as contributors, it of course links to the, for example, stakeholder forum as discussed before for the European Soil Observatory. We will have a look whether we have a good understanding of a problem, which is soil pollution. So type, extent of the pollution, and also available data. Looking at different angles of the problem, diffuse pollution or be it point type pollution. Together with industry, we will see are there solutions for preventing and then remediating. So cost-benefit analysis, maybe some considerations, pollutant by pollutant basis. So what we would like to do here is to connect the discussions between monitoring on one part and outlook on the other part. So you will see it from the larger perspective. And how about new digital technologies? We are in the digital age, so it will also come in the discussions. So first, the Slido contest, maybe to get a bit better, I will maybe stop
I have
sharing.
to share. Yes, thank you.
So Diana, you can take the floor, please, with the Slido.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope you can see the QR code for you
Yes,
to
we can
access
see.
our. Okay, then let me try to log in.
I'm also trying to do it
I'm
by my phone. So please, that's the only occasion to play with the phone while being at the conference.
Just logging in.
Just to explain a little bit, you will have a couple of questions, general ones, to get a bit better and to see what is the public, where are you from, what's the context in which you are working. You just have to use your phone and then scan the QR code and get to the chat.
Aha, some change.
So maybe Diana, we can go through different questions to see. So yeah, the first one is.
Well, at the moment is from which sector are you identified with? We want to understand a little bit the audience of this, the people participating in the workshop. Still ongoing, a lot of, by now, 21 responses. Let me see if it's more or less what amount of people we have. Still increasing. Maybe we can wait a little bit more. Oh, a lot of research.
There are already some first comments that the industrial response, it's rather weak for the time being. Maybe it will increase.
Okay. When you think we can move on to the next one? We have a lot of participants, so.
Yeah. So we can maybe wait another 15 seconds and go to the next question. It's a kind of glimpse on the participants here.
Piotr, sorry, I would just to mention to who is not skilled with the QR code, like many people, just go to the website slido.com and you are asked of let's say a code that is CSO _RemTech 21. So in this way you will be able to answer. No, because sorry, not everybody is skilled on
It's good, of course. I was using my phone, but there is also a possibility of joining Slido through a web page. Thank you very much, Marco, for this suggestion and explanations.
Okay, I can then move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So, and to which group do you belong? We understand that in Chemtech there's this definition. Oh, wow.
So we see quite a strong participation in the Slido. The most present here are experts. Then, of course, some regulators and policymakers, suppliers of services and technologies, and problem owners are the last ones. So there are not so many problem owners. Almost half of the audience.
Piotr, we have a lot of experts, but very, very few problem owners. Like it's not their problem, no? I'm expert, but it's not my problem.
Okay, maybe 15 seconds more, and then we go to the next one.
Mm-hmm. This we are increasing the number of participants.
Yes.
Okay, I will move on to the next one.
Yes,
There's
please.
this and another one more. This is big list.
So here, the question is a bit more complex. What is your most challenging contamination source for remediation policy and technology? So where are the challenges? What is the most important source of contamination according to you? We have microplastics, we have PFAS, we have emerging contaminants, diffuse pollution, sludge, vapor intrusion, harbor megasites, military sites, radioactive sites. So of course it could continue, but we have chosen only these. I see that a lot of people are stating that emerging contaminants are of a big importance here. And then of course the diffuse pollution is taking its part, and microplastics and PFAS. So indeed, these are of concern to everybody. My only comment here would be that for some of them, we might have some monitoring data, some real data at our disposal. We have a good understanding of a problem. But if we go to emerging contaminants, maybe we don't have enough data. Maybe we don't have enough information, knowledge, and also the effects on human health, as Joachim was mentioning in the first session. So these are probably the substances that might go to a kind of watch list in the future. So I'm already opening a bit the discussion further.
I think we can move on to the next one, which is the last one in this initial part.
So what is for you the most challenging contamination issue for remediation policy and technology? So we have remediation and COVID, climate change, high resolution site characterization, digital innovation, sustainable technologies, bioremediation, wastewater treatment, human health and toxicology, fate and transport modeling, landfills and waste management, sediment management. So what are the contamination issues?
Some inversion here. climate change is always the hot topic.
Exactly. Then we have sustainable technologies. Landfills and waste management is getting the third place. And then human health, fate, and other issues. You see here some top 5, but through the app or the page, you can see more.
Okay. I think these are the winners.
Yes, yes, yes. I see some comments from the public that all of them are tough. So of course it's difficult to choose, but let's say that's a Slido contest to warm you up a little bit. I'm just looking at the participants. Yes, I think that we have reached more or less half of people who actively participated in the collection of inputs.
So I'll stop sharing for you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. And we will come back to Diana in a while. She will provide some important inputs also, considering some of the responses that you have provided. I will continue with my presentation, hoping that I will share the good screen. So this should be the good one. Okay. After this first Slido, we go into the matter. What it is, this clean soil outlook? What's the broader perspective, and how to put it in the framework of what we have discussed in the morning? Clean soil outlook is a part of a bigger reporting that we are preparing all together. And I'm talking here about the Zero Pollution Monitoring and Outlook report. That's a report composed of many components, but let's say 2 of them are crucial. It's the monitoring part, and of course, we think that integrated monitoring of pollution will substantially support better governance of zero pollution. So I think that it will provide some insights. It will provide some data and information on overall pollution levels and inputs. And of course, it will allow us to monitor whether the implementation of the policy that you have heard about this morning is on track, and maybe some adjustments are needed. Of course, just to mention other regular reporting, and that will be also helped by this report, which is environmental implementation reviews and 8th environmental action plan monitoring. The second part of this report is the Zero Pollution Outlook, and it will analyze synergies and trade-offs between different policies. As you have understood from the morning session, there are different pieces of legislation that are speaking about pollution, about zero pollution ambition, and all these pieces must be taken together, must be integrated. And in the outlook part, we have to translate early warnings into the recommendations. So what we are looking for, okay, maybe we don't know this issue, this problem here, so maybe we must know a bit more. So there's an early warning, and it must be identified in the outlook that will be constructed together with you and the member states. To give you just a hint on the timing, the first Zero Pollution Monitoring and Outlook report is planned for 2022. So that's, let's say, the bigger picture. What's this composition? What's its composition of this Zero Pollution Monitoring and Outlook report? As you see, a lot of elements, but we just go to the Zero Pollution Outlook report, where the clean soil outlook will be present. we are at the very early stage of this plan of this construction, and here at this workshop we would like to share with you our considerations on how to build it and what's important. Some responsibilities, some institutions in charge, just to mention. For the monitoring part, in general, we look at the European Environmental Agency, while for the zero pollution outlook, we look more at the JRC side of collaboration and inputs. And of course, everything will be channeled to the big Commission report, as you see on this image. Integration. I think that in the morning we have spoken a lot about integration. We see the problem from different angles. Just to mention here on the left-hand side, you see air, soil, water. So how to tackle this within zero pollution ambition. I think that the ambitious report must, of course, collect all the inputs and provide some analysis on them. So our clean soil outlook, it's not only a separate document, it will have similar structure to the others. It must provide similar inputs. As you see here, I think that most of the sectors present at the REMTEC are also present at this diagram. We see here industry, we see here contaminated sites, agriculture, urban sectors, and different ecosystems. All of them produces some pollution, some contamination. All of this contamination can be transferred through air, water, and soil. And of course, we are focusing on soil and this zero pollution ambition. The timeline, JRC is going to make a proposal for the clean soil outlook by the end of 2021 of its structure, how it should look like. We already have some elements that we'll be discussing today with you. Then it will be discussed through the stakeholder forum of the EU Soil Observatory, for example, and there will be some other events where you would be able to contribute. First report due by the end of 2022, but it's not the end. It's an evolutionary program. The outlook, of course, now will have to evolve, and we will propose a new outlook based on the new evidence that is available to us in 2 years' time after the first one. Don't see it as a document that is final, but it will evolve with time. From monitoring to outlook, what I have already mentioned, we know what are the preliminary gaps. We don't have the full legislation on soil. We know that the European Parliament called for European Commission for creating a holistic approach on the soil legislation. We know some other gaps, but we have to identify them clearly in the clean soil outlook and propose how to close them. So that's the role of the outlook. Of course, we have to mention also future projections, maybe concerning contamination evolution, maybe different contaminants that are emerging now. We have to see what are the effects on biodiversity if we do something or if we don't do anything, or maybe if we are proposing different targets. These are the policy options that will be put in the clean soil outlook. Now I would like to invite my colleague Arwin Jones to present you some first elements of the table of contents of the clean soil outlook, and give you some also insights on how we are going to describe the state of our environment and the state of soil pollution. So Arwin.
Good morning, Piotr. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect, thank you.
This is not good.
Maybe can you move on to the next slide?
I just saw the workshops they have started.
Yes, I see some background noise. I don't know if Marco, maybe you can try to mute some participants. Okay, maybe Arwin, you can continue now. That's a bit better.
Okay. So thank you very much for that introduction, and indeed let's sort of build a little bit on the elements that was also presented this morning, especially by Joachim in the overview of the Zero Pollution Action Plan communication. And indeed, we really are at the very beginning of this process, but we don't really have a huge amount of time either to produce things, because as you're aware, the Commission would like to publish the first outlook and monitoring report by the end of 2022. And given the various review processes and steps in there, we're really looking to have, let's say, by this time next year, quite an advanced draft of the report, if not something very close to the final version. So in reality, we have about 12 months of rather intensive work ahead of us on this. But what we've tried to do is really to begin to have some initial reflections on how we might structure the report, and basically try to sketch out an initial table of contents that we would like to address. Unlike, let's say, the air and water media, specifically the air part, we don't really have a model to follow. There has been a clean air outlook in the past, which predominantly looks at sort of broad compliance with various legislative instruments. And in soil, we don't necessarily have such a well-developed legislative framework for soil protection. And in the water part, I think you're all aware of the various reports that come out in relation to bathing water and drinking water and nitrates in groundwater. And so there's a very well structured reporting mechanism under water legislation, but again, with soil, we're a little bit behind the curve. And so initially, I think we have quite an open mind as to how the report should be structured. I think the important point to have is that we will have very clear messages that actually link to the monitoring report and what needs to be done in the next 2 years to guide member states in addressing soil pollution with an eye on the 2024 outlook report. And so in essence, our thinking has been to structure, let's say, our thoughts a little bit along the approach of the DPSIR methodology, and I'll come back to that in a little bit moment. But then to highlight maybe where we are in terms of legislation and strategies and political actions that are indeed targeting soil pollution across the EU, and where there are compliance issues, maybe we can report on that, but there are also a very strong set of soil-related targets or soil health-related targets across the different strategies of the Green Deal. And I think that we also have to be aware that while they may not necessarily have sort of legal compliance to them, to have the goals of the Green Deal met, we have to be sure that there is progress also in reaching these more aspirational targets. And so there is an area there that we want to be able to sort of show that there is progress, at least or continued progress in addressing the topics of soil pollution. And then also then sort of building on the presentation of Rainer, we have to be aware on the issues of how do we understand in some cases where we have natural occurrence of certain pollutants, and how do we clearly extract the background levels from those of human-induced contamination, and then at what level these concentrations become of concern from both an environmental and also from a human health or human well-being point of view. And then we want to see how basically the situation is changing with respect to all these considerations from a whole range of different pollution sources and contaminants. So while we have here, let's say, a sort of a broad structure, we really want to be able to show in a very concrete way as well what the knowledge gaps are, what are the trends that we have, what are the areas of key concern, so that they can then be focused towards setting up some objectives, both in the long term but also in the near future, where some additional commitment, either in terms of policy development or in terms of funding, need to be considered to address these specific issues, either in terms of, as Joachim said, the reduction of emissions of pollutants, which would be the preferred option, but where they are already existing, that we really then target those that are of highest concern in regards to remediation. Maybe the next slide, Piotr. Okay. So the overall approach is basically to look at really what are the key drivers of soil pollution, and these are basically reflecting, let's say, societal needs, shall we say, for different aspects, for goods, for products, for food, also in terms of the transport, and how maybe increased urbanization is actually driving a lot of the activities that are causing pressures in relation to soil pollution. And here we really want to sort of highlight, again, the main objectives of the Green Deal for increased sustainability, and to be able to pick up also on other policy areas. We already heard about the circular economy action plan and so on, and to understand how these other factors can help us address levels of contaminants that are coming into soil. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the normal DPSR framework, we would have pressures. So these are the pressures that are resulting then from specific activities. It may be that in some sectors that there should be maybe an A before the P, between the D and the P. So specifically relating to the activities that the pressures that the drivers are causing, and then they themselves then cause pressures themselves. But in this framework, we want to identify specific areas that are driving soil pollution forward, and here, for example, another one is indeed in terms of waste management, and the presentation and the work done by Serenella, for example, in terms of life cycle analysis, really fits into very much the discussion on pressures and how they can be reduced. Next slide, please. So then, obviously, these pressures have they affect the state of our environment, or they cause a change in the state, maybe to be more accurate. And as I've said, we want to look at basically what is the state in relation to both the classical concept of point pollution, and so in relation to contaminated sites and landfills, Also maybe flagging up here some factors relating to illegal waste management operations as well, which there's increasing policy concerns about. And then obviously the diffuse aspects. Here we were wondering also by the source sector, or maybe by groups of pollutants, so that because then we will be addressing similar characteristics that different substances to have. So to really understand what do we know about their broad distribution in the environment, and how they're likely to change. And of course, this is really connecting closely to the monitoring report. So we can see here a very close linkage between the information that we are collecting on the condition of soils, or member states are collecting, or even within the private sector. So here we are looking at specifically in relation to the contaminated site sector, how can we maybe help to drive this forward in terms of better registry, better recording, better transparency in the information associated with contaminated sites and diffuse pollution. And here there are also potentially other, let's say, waste stream areas that we need to address as well. Slide, please. Thank you. So indeed, it's clearly then that whatever we see in the monitoring, if it's of concern, will have an impact either on human well-being or planetary well-being. We've heard the concept of planetary boundaries being discussed several times this morning. And here basically we want to talk about the role of, again, limits and thresholds. So we want to understand really, do we have a really good grasp on critical thresholds for all the substances that we have of concern, especially those of emerging contaminants, which was shown in the Slido poll to be the one of highest, let's say, interest or concern. And then also the link between soil and then the other environmental media, because we can't look at soil in isolation. We already saw in the diagram that Piotr presented, that there's the link to air. Soils emit to air, air deposits on soils. We have the fluxes and flows to surface water and groundwater, and into other habitats as well. So we also have to have this sort of circular consideration when it comes into impacts. And I think also very importantly is that not just the fact that we have a certain concentration of a substance in soil, but the impact that then has on the soil functions and then their related ecosystem services, particularly, for example, if you want to look at the challenges in increased sequestration of organic carbon in soils, which could be then compromised by the presence of certain chemicals or pollutants in the soil. So we really have to sort of take a much broader consideration than simply the fact that it's exceeding a certain a threshold, and then of course the health impacts as well. Yeah, fine. Yeah. Then finally, we want to look to see about the responses. I mean, we understand already that the remediation industry and a lot of regulation work goes on in terms of assessing hazards and the risks associated with at least the contaminated sites aspect. Maybe it's less well developed in terms of diffuse pollution, looking at the broad gambit of chemicals that we are trying to address. So we want to be able to see that the policies that are being established under the Green Deal are making an impact. We want to be able to show that the situation is improving over time. Maybe it takes a while to see a a reaction, but we want to be able to demonstrate that EU policy making is making a difference, and maybe there are clear gaps, maybe in our knowledge and understanding, which requires additional policy development or additional tools to be established. We're, as you've heard, looking to also make this information more available to the society at large through different dashboards and indicators, or the concept of maybe of this soil pollution index or a footprint measure to show basically the impact of societal demand on soils. And one of the key areas within the communication is actually on the establishment of a soil priority monitoring list, or a soil pollution watch list. What does this actually mean, and how this could be developed in the future? So these are some aspects that we want to sort of try to consider within the Outlook report. And then, of course, from your point of view, I think what's really interesting is as you're actually at the heart of the matter, you know, what's coming up on the horizon in terms of restoration practices. Are you developing other methodologies to address microplastic remediation in arable fields? Do we have alternatives for maybe some very complicated contaminated sites where we have multiple pressures, multiple stresses acting there? And also to be able to contribute to future reporting. We don't really want to burden organizations or member states with questionnaires, complicated questionnaires. It would be good to be able to harvest from you in various ways the outputs and your success stories, so we can begin to sort of compile the broader knowledge base that then can be used for things like the next zero pollution Outlook report and the state of European environment and so on. So, as I said, these are very much early days, sort of early thinking about issues and topics. So we would welcome, from a broad range of actors, different inputs into this, different reflections, and your contributions eventually. So, Piotr, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Arwin, for presenting our first considerations. I think we can go on with the presentation, touching upon a bit more technical matter. We were speaking here about the monitoring and Outlook, two parts that should be integrated, we wanted to show you our considerations concerning the building of the watch list, or maybe having already information and putting some substances on the priority list of substances to be monitored. So the next slide, presented by Diana, will provide you some elements on how we can analyze a substance of concern or a group of substances of concern in order to decide whether it's on the priority. We know we are managing the problem and then we have enough data, or maybe it's a watch list. So an early warning that is there. So Diana.
Thank you, Piotr. Well, I would like just to introduce you a little bit of this preliminary development of a flux diagram that aims at general classification or characterization of a substance or a class of substances before we admit it to a priority or to a watch list. Basically, what we do in basically, what we have in this white left part is a general classification, and which includes at the beginning if we can identify a pathway to soil of a given substance that we might think perhaps this is a dangerous pollutant or not. If we are able to identify a way through of this substance to the soil, then we should characterize it with as a potential point source or diffuse pollution. And this characterization is important for later on when we decide if we are going to do which basis for our monitoring is going to have and which measures we are going to apply. But once we characterize it, then we need to know from all the substances around the world if this substance is located and can be found in the EU soils. It's a very important aspect. And here I can introduce already these circular symbols that identify possible tools for the solution of this or identification of this criteria. For instance, the Lucas monitoring can be essential in providing just the identification if the certain substance is or not present in EU soils. Then we have the substance. If we found it is present in our soils, we need to understand the risk it represents. Is there any threshold with reports, publication, and scientific evidences that can cause any harm to human health or environment? This is the very important and most critical threshold in this phase, because after it's a positive reply, then this substance would be considered a substance of concern and goes to this yellow screen, this yellow background, let's say it like this, where we should take some actions accordingly. Well, once we select or identify as a substance of concern, we need to understand if we have any data to use to understand its extent. In case we don't have, again, we identified a possible tool to help us in this criteria as Lucas. And we have to identify if we know something about this substance, if we know the total extent. And if we don't have this ground knowledge, we should include it in the watch list. This watch list is for all these substances we don't know entirely their extent or how they are disseminated through EU. So we can do in the first stage a screening, presence, absence throughout the European soils to understand its extent. And then in cases well disseminated, we should look to see if the criteria of risk are passed, so that can cause any harm. And in case this is a positive, this means positive, there are evidences of these thresholds being surpassed, and it should go to a priority list. The priority list is the list of components we know, pollutants we know, they cause harm, they need to be monitored, and they should be constantly assessed throughout time. For this, we also identify the European Soil Observatory as a potential tool to address this management and identification of the pollutants for the watch list and priority list. Once we have the characterization and identification, then we should look to what are our actions according to this separation, let's say, identification of pollutants. And the first of all is what is already previously identified, the monitoring. Of course, we have to do a monitoring according to the characteristics of the pollution. In this case, a point source, when it's a single identified source of pollution located on one side, or diffuse pollution, which in this case, this monitoring needs to be spatially distributed. And here again, I pick up the example of Luca's monitoring to understand if some thresholds are passed over a spatial area. And then, according to this possible thresholds, then we should have some actions. We have identified here some, and there's possibly much more, of course, where in the case of point source pollutions like brownfield sites, landfills, there's an initial risk assessment of this area and then a potential remediation stage or other steps following it. And in the case of the diffuse pollution, several alternatives to attempt to reduce emissions at this level in order to mitigate the effects of this pollutant, presence of these pollutants in soil that can harm either human or environment. Well, just overall, we would like to introduce you this. It's still under development, and of course, all the feedback regarding this is welcome. Let's go to the next one. I put a kind of animation. For instance, when we were developing this, we would like just to highlight this is under development stage. We tested with several substances possible flaws of this model that will, if you press more 2 or 3 times, yes, that will provide us, and one more time, just to give an overall that we tested several substances, and these substances are aimed to have a classification. Are they in watch list? Are they not of concern? Are they in priority list? And we are trying to build this, and perhaps testing over more substances will be the way through to the development of this tool for the future. That's it. I think I can. I think it's it. I can pass my word, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana, for this presentation. I would like also to reinforce the call that Diana launched for contributions, and also maybe some constructive suggestions to the diagram, still in the making. So just I wanted to underline this. And after this preliminary considerations, you have already two elements, main elements of the clean soil outlook. You know where it's located in the broader policy perspective. You know its possible table of contents, our preliminary thoughts, and also you know the diagram that we are constructing, the methodology, actually, the methodology that will allow us to identify different substances of concern, to put them into the regular monitoring, or maybe as early warning to be put in the clean soil outlook, providing some projections and further considerations. How can I contribute? So it's a call. So we are looking, of course, at the different areas of expertise for everything what we have said, exposed here in the morning session and in this workshop session. We see that there are plenty of areas of expertise that are needed. Cost-benefit analysis, then availability of new technologies. So what are the technologies, how they can be used? I think that's the business of remediation and technology partners. Then digital technologies, and also to have some successful stories. It's also inspiring in different communities. I'm just putting here registries of contaminated sites. It could be at a local level. It could be just location, maybe characterization, and maybe options what to do with a contaminated site. So of course it's risk-based. We have cost analysis. We have a lot of elements and expertise that is needed. When we talk about the diffuse pollution, of course, also its extent, characterization, and different scenarios that might be put in the Outlook report. Just to mention the broader context, a Zero Pollution Action Plan, the Green Deal, and of course the New European Bauhaus, if we want to obtain no zero land take. And if you want to be sure that some brownfields are redeveloped in a sustainable manner, that's also one of the topics here. What are further steps? Of course, the discussion is still ongoing. We have all these elements in mind. What are the substances, metals, sewage sludge, fertilizers? They are all connected to a legislation, and now we have to, let's say, see it on the ground through Lucas, through European Soil Observatory, and the SDAC, which is the soil database, which is underneath. And also from satellites, maybe if we want some high resolution images, spectral images, maybe we can have more insights and follow up on different things. So of course, it is all necessary to get to know the fate and transport of contaminants. So that's a connection with the image that was shown before, taking all the aspects and sectors into account. Just to mention, the reflection has just started also with the European Environmental Agency and our partners in other DGs of the European Commission. So I think that we come to Slido part 2, and we can still use the QR code that will be put very soon. I'm stop sharing the screen. And Diana, if you succeed in connection, let us know, please.
Sorry, I was mute.
No
you have the QR code and the code on your left. I don't know if you see.
Yes, and by the way, we can still proceed if somebody was logged in. The old Slido, it's just a continuation, so please use the same screen that you had. Just to see the first question is the Clean Soil Outlook report, the table of contents. So the first element that we have provided to you, what do you think could be enhanced? So also what's the important part of the report, of the Outlook report, that is important for you, for industry, for you as a researcher, for you as a policymaker, and for you as an expert, or maybe also problem owner, although we have few problem owners, as we have seen. So you can also propose additional answers in the question answer chat. So I see that you are quite also interested in the DPSIR approach, providing the elements and the methodology on the description of our soil pollution problem.
We're still halfway through. I think you can wait a little bit more.
Yes. How many questions do we have in the Slido? 2 or 3?
We have this and another one.
Okay, so we just have 2 questions in total. So
well, let's wait a 15 seconds more.
Mhm.
I think we can see the
Yes.
chats too. Collecting success.
We'll be following the chat, and I will also try to follow up on what is going on.
We can now move maybe to the next one.
Yes.
On the other topic.
So the other topic is a priority and watch list flags diagram that was presented. What are the parts that you are interested in? What could be enhanced according to you?
Very well.
So I see there's some competition between different parts.
Yes.
There's also a possibility of putting some suggestions in the question and answer chat that we have. So I see that the flags diagram, the decision tree could be enhanced. Of course.
I think the answer is to be increased.
Alternative tools is also going ahead. The idea is somehow to be transparent in the process of thinking of different substances that we are concerned about, and I think that the tools will help us to go through it in an easy manner, as Diana was mentioning. Lucas itself and also Lucas soil pollution module will help to have an overview on the situation, to have some monitoring data, to have some trends. Then, of course, if we don't know, we are still in a situation where the substance is of concern. So then maybe we have to watch it. We have to put an early warning, then make it stronger and propose this new emerging contaminant into the watch list, and to have some more info about its presence in soil, about its impact on human health, etc. So different tools will help to go through different steps of this diagram. Okay, so
I will stop sharing, maybe.
Thank you very much, Diana. And I'm just looking at the screen, what is happening here. Slide 2, part 2. So thank you, Diana. That was not the last slide, but the last exercise that we have at this workshop, to collect your inputs. I will in a second go to the chat to see what was going on there. So let's say some first conclusions on the Clean Soil Outlook. I would also like to invite then Arwin, Diana, and Anne if they want to add something. But as Arwin was mentioning, the time frame for the Clean Soil Outlook production is quite short. So that's why we are launching already some first considerations. We have our mind open for contributions, ideas, and projections. So Outlook should, of course, look ahead and propose some solutions, ideas based on some evidence. So that's very important. Of course, working together is crucial. Industry, member states, European institutions. That's why we counted on this REMTech Europe event, which is really international, and then gathering together all the stakeholders that we need here, not forgetting about the society. So citizen science is becoming more and more important. Just to mention one of the sectors, contaminated sites or landfills, illegal, legal. Sometimes we need the inputs and the tools to deal with it. And just to mention the stakeholder forum, the stakeholder forum will help to launch different working groups, and working groups on pollution will be discussed on the 20th of October. So please sign up as a stakeholder. Luca was mentioning that we would like to be completely transparent in the EU zoo. So that's it. Be a part of this and sign up. You have very dangerously some emails that you can use with your suggestions, and that's mine, Piotr, and Arwin's one as well. So from my side, that in this part, that's it. I don't know if maybe Arwin or Diana would like to put some comments.
Maybe just to reinforce what you've said, indeed, that and again, maybe the words of Luca in relation to the forum, that we are open-minded, and we do welcome your contributions. We are not specialists in remediation practices necessarily, so I think the welcome, the inputs from this group are really welcome, especially in terms of the developing technologies. I think that's really where I see a strong contribution to the Outlook report. Okay, so if anything comes up later on, I'm happy to contribute again.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the chat, trying to see if there are some questions. I don't know if I can engage also maybe Marco. Marco, maybe you have identified some hot issues.
Yes,
because,
there are some difficult questions, and I don't know if we have the time to go in deep with all those. I have also one question for Arwin and another couple for Diana, but let's give space to our attendants. I see that a question is from Christian Murray. Is there an accommodation for radionuclide isotopes technology as a monitoring data point for the amount of soil erosion that has occurred to date to draw against other biochem data? Probably this collection of radionuclide isotopes is, I would say, more for Luca than for Arwin and Diana. But if any, I don't know if Luca is any more online. But if there is also Arwin that would like to answer to this.
I don't see Luca online, but maybe he is, but I can't see all the participants. But indeed, yes, in our let's say reflections on the soil watch list, we had radionuclides as a category of substances that should be considered. We even published a paper last year, or even earlier this year now, where we actually re-examined Luca samples for the cesium concentrations, for example. So the scope is there to have this topic addressed, and that's the beauty actually of having these archival systems where, you know, maybe we don't have the funding to measure everything in one time, but if the facilities become available or the funding streams become available, then we can go back and look and re-measure the survey data. So in terms of radionuclides, they're not ignored. And indeed, the JRC also has just done some recent major publication in terms of radon. So maybe it's not necessarily the same as soil pollution, but it's a polluting substance that has health implications. So radionuclides are definitely there in our minds. I don't know about the soil erosion part, I have to say. But
thank you, Arwin. I think also it's interesting from Earth perspective to understand after more than 30 years from Chernobyl, how is the situation in the European soils for those kind of particular contaminants. Second question is from Jesse James Owuzu. On threshold, is ever for you, Arwin. On thresholds, does zero pollution mean total remediation or just below current thresholds for all contaminants? Is to you, Arwin. I'm sure zero total remediation is something that is hard to be completely achieved.
Yeah, I think that you've just answered the question. Actually, I think zero pollution is a inspirational ambition, and I'm sure that in reality it's going to be maybe very almost impossible to get to zero pollution. But I think what we're trying to ensure is that emissions are reduced, and as I said, when they are present in soils, that they are remediated to a situation where they don't pose a problem to environment or human health. I'm not an expert in remediation technology, so I can't say whether if people can physically remove all aspects of a contamination, but as I said, the goal for the zero pollution is to reduce significantly the issue of soil contamination at the EU level.
Thank you, Arwin. The next question is from Christian Murray. Who is going to authorize new technologies for soil remediation and preservation?
I'm afraid I can't answer this. I don't know. I mean, who authorizes them at the moment? Maybe at member states level. No.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's not a matter of the European Commission. And I would also add my question here, Arwin. My question is more a consideration for the remediation point of view. No, you mentioned in your presentation that the remediation is also one part that is really important. No, the available technologies. No, there is a project with the Impel network that involves also EUNET working group contamination with Frank Spartis, the common forum with Dietmar Müller and Nicole with Thomas Albergaria, that is going to focus on studying remediation technologies. So we are studying 2 technologies per year. Maybe the result of this project, that is a 4-year project that will last from 2020 to 2024, may be useful probably for this discussion at the European level. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, as I said, and also as other people have said, this is the start of a process now. So the first outlook report will be, in essence, stating where we are at the moment, I think, and what are our initial issues. But we see it very much that as the knowledge base increases, then this should be reflected in the future outlook reports. So yes, we'll be open to any input or information stream that we can show that helps us explain the situation for soil contamination, and more importantly on how it's changing and what can be done to change it. Maybe that's the aspect. So if there are information that's available now that we can use in the next 6 months, shall we say, that'd be great. But if not, then we'd have to consider it for the second outlook report.
Very, very well, Arwin. Next, more than a question, is a consideration from Ernst Barsch. He's a developer also of an innovative technology called groundwater circulation wells. and his consideration is, I think, is even more important to look at the failures and learn from them. I would, if I may, Arwin, I can answer to Ernst. We are collecting with that project more than 50 case studies throughout Europe, and nobody submitted a failure case study. And this is the reason why probably nobody wants to share the failures. But however, I agree, I fully agree, Ernst, that for instance, for some contaminants, for instance, chlorinated compounds, pump and treat alone is not anymore a solution that is should be put in place, as well as some regions like Flanders do something additionally of pump and treat. Going down with the questions, Christian, I'm sorry, I will skip your fourth question because we have asked a lot of your questions. Valentina Greco, what digital solution can help achieving zero pollution? Just Copernicus, or there are others technologies?
Maybe
Arwin and also
maybe
Piotr.
I can intervene here, because there is a big initiative Europe in its digital age. So I think that first of all, we are looking how to digitalize different aspects, and as far as the contamination is concerned, I think that it's also about monitoring. If we have a monitoring network that is automatized, that is fully digital, so we have some automatic measurements, automatic transmission of data that are harmonized, that are available for institutions and for stakeholders, I think that's also important aspect of the digital solution. So this data sharing that was discussed before. Other could be, of course, using multispectral imagery. We are now having a study on how to use multispectral imagery in landfills, not only localization, but also characterization. So what kind of substances might be emitted? Is it possible to recognize them using multispectral analysis? Do we see the temperature change? Do we see some other characteristics? So not only in situ measurements, but also a broader scope of Copernicus or orthophoto, which are could be multispectral. So these are the examples I wanted to state here. And important information, the Zero Pollution Ambition and its report are also providing a special part input on zero pollution and digital solutions. So I think it's at the top of the agenda from the European Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Piotr. I have a couple of questions also for Diana. Sorry, Christian, I cannot ask all the questions that you have raised because we don't have time, and you want also to go to lunch soon, and then we have to, me and Piotr at least, we have to start again at 2 p.m. So that's that's a fact. Diana, two questions regarding the flow chart. That was also one part that was more discussed according to Slido results. I have seen that there is a place where substance is declared as no concern, but some substances have long-term effect, or at least we find that their effect after a long time. An example is asbestos, no, that stays in our lungs for, I don't know, 30 years before developing a illness. So I'm scared a bit of giving this declaration of no effect, no concern, substance of no concern. What do you think? It is possible to review also those substances?
We are smiling because we discussed this also. We were trying during the development, we were trying to identify these aspects where our model to fit all would fail, for instance. And for instance, I think Piotr got the asbestos, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed.
And it's just a simple, when we define if a substance is dangerous or substance is of concern or not, we have to identify circumstances in which it can become mobile, where the problems start, right? And yes, we changed the module accordingly to consider just a slight occasion in which this substance is no concern, it starts to be of concern. For instance, removing it, moving it, and so on and so forth. So yes, we are taking into account these little details, and yeah, we should test it for more substances to make sure we capture the entire variability. But yeah, like my colleague said, it's good to have would be good to have some feedback in this matter.
Thank you, Diana. The second question is on the other part of the flow chart. When you pass from the watch list to the priority list, no? There is a small arrow that is very heavy, however, because it says that a substance should be widely disseminated. So, as I'm very curious, and you know, from coming from the watch list to the priority list means also for member states investing resources in monitoring those compounds in the priority list. What is meant for widely disseminated?
Well, it was not entirely only widely disseminated, but also going above a certain threshold in which might cause some danger to human and the environment. During this initial phase, we of the watch list itself, we also wanted to see if it's how is the extent of this pollutant is everywhere. Is this the widely disseminated, is to understand the spatial dissemination throughout Europe and to try to understand what is the dimension of our problem in the first stage and then going to the thresholds. Of course, this is a very generalistic approach for something so complex. But what we wanted to say here is that there is an intention of passing from the watch list to priority list in case there is a serious need, and once we see the real problem of this substance. I don't know if my colleagues want to add something. Maybe not. I think I was clear. Thank you.
It was clear, yes.
You were very, very clear. So I understand that is important also the extent of the impact without mentioning the number of states. I don't know, like the holy water in Vatican City, no? Imagine it would be a contaminant. It's not of European concern, no? So that's just joking. I'm okay. Piotr, I don't see any other questions from the chat. If you have anything to add, yes. And I would leave the floor to you, Arvin and Diana, for last remarks.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any more questions. I really appreciated also the reactions from the public, and I hope that it attracted your attention, our quiz and the presentation. I think we have collected a couple of elements that will then shape it better. And I wanted to thank my colleagues for their participation and support. So thank you, Diana, Anne Maréchal, who is in the background for the time being, and Arvin Jones, who was presenting here today. So thanks for your contribution, and thank you also to Marco and Sylvia and the organizers of REMTech to allow this big time slot for the policy talking and industry action in this respect. So from our side, that's everything. Thank you very much for your attention, and don't forget to eat something for lunch and then join the sessions in the afternoon. Coming back to you, Marco. You are muted, Marco, for the time.
Sorry, you want to go to lunch, and just 20 seconds to explain that in the afternoon we have 3 very interesting webinars. One is on PFAS characterization, environmental impact, remediation strategies, starting from 2:30 Central European Summer Time. You can have also a look on the other time zones that are reported here. The second one with also Piotr, with Dietmar and Wouter on sustainable management of contaminated sites, starting as well as at 2:30 Central European Summer Time, that on sustainable management of contaminated sites. And after this, another session, session 4, waste tailings and acid mine drainage, will start at 5 p.m. Central European Summer Time, and they will be chaired by José Gouveia, Stephanie Fiorenza, and Robert Jelinek. So have a good lunch, and see you on the afternoon.